Chapter 61. Nangongja had stayed in the country of hot water for nearly 3 days. Almost every day he took Mishiro and Ling to play. He didn't know if Mishiro had forgotten that his purpose of coming out was to paint. The hot springs in the country of hot water had some special features. But no matter how special things were, he would lose interest if he saw them every day. Therefore, Nangongja was actually prepared to tell Mishiro and Ling after packing up some of his belongings he could leave here. But it turned out that plans were always disrupted. On this day, Nangongja carried his black sword and came back from his morning exercise outside. It was still early, around 5 o'clock in the morning. When Nangongja walked to the door of the hotel he was staying in, he found a team of shinobi standing at the door of the hotel he was staying in, as if they were waiting for someone. The leader of the shinobi seemed to be looking around, and after seeing Nangongja, he quickly ran over. Jonin-sama. The leader of the shinobi didn't seem to tell his subordinates about Nangongja's identity. The leader of the shinobi just thought that Nangongja was an ordinary woodleaf jonin. Although the etiquette was thorough, the respect was obviously not enough. "Is it your leader, Kanzuya-sama, who asked you to find me?" Nangongja asked knowingly. After all, in such a country, the only person who could command an entire team of shinobi was Kanzuya, the leader of the shinobi in name. "Yes, Kanzuya-sama has something important to discuss with you. He wants to invite you to the office of the shinobi." This shinobi was very different from ordinary shinobi and shinobi villagers. Because most of the villagers and shinobi didn't have a good impression of Kanzuya, who had no strength, but a shrewd businessman. However, when this person mentioned Kanzuya's name, the light in his eyes was very bright for a moment. It was like every woodleaf resident was the same when they mentioned Naruto. It was a kind of existence that formed a pillar in the soul. It seems that this ninja is Watanabe's confidant. Although they had only interacted for a short time, and Nangongja hadn't fought with this ninja yet. But judging from his casual performance, this person's strength is at least at the Jonin level. "How should I address you?" Nangongja asked the ninja. "Just call me Water Luster." Tang Ren's leader, Water Luster, was obviously not a person who was good at chatting. Finally, Nangongja opened his mouth, but he abruptly cut off the entire topic. Coincidentally, Nangongja was not a talkative person. Therefore, the scene where the two of them interacted with each other was so cold that it felt like it was going to snow in June. Finally, the two of them remained silent for a while. Nangongja was the first to break the silence. "Please lead the way and come with me to meet Lord Hai." Water Luster nodded and moved towards Nangongja. He wanted to show that he was leading the way for Nangongja. And the ninjas who came with him began to have some thoughts in their hearts. Could it be that all the powerful people were like this? After all, Nangongja and Water Luster's ability to deal with people was really unbearable. Just like Nangongja, when he talked to leader Kanzuya, he was unexpectedly low-key. And now, when he talked to Water Luster, it was very awkward. It was not like a person with a normal EQ would do something like this. Ignoring the strange eyes of the Tang Ren around them, Nangongja and Water Luster soon arrived at leader Kanzuya's office. Kanzuya was sitting behind a huge desk, and a very extravagant pure gold Tang Ren symbol was hanging behind Kanzuya's back. The posture of a nouveau riche. "Why did Lord Kanzuya ask me to come here?" Nangongja pulled a chair opposite to Kanzuya and sat down. "Do you want to ask me more about Haiden?" Considering that Kanzuya was absent-minded last time, Nangongja thought that Kanzuya wanted to communicate with him about Haiden. But Kanzuya, who was sitting behind the desk, shook his head. "Actually, I have already ordered about Haiden. The whole ninja world has also started to prepare for Haiden's arrest. I can't do anything more. After all, Tangren doesn't have a huge umbu department like the great ninja village." Hearing Kanzuya's explanation, Nangongja couldn't say anything more. But Nangongja still felt that Kanzuya didn't seem to care about such a crazy ninja in his ninja village. "In fact, this time, I invited Nangong Jonin to come here to ask Nangong Jonin to go to the Woodleaf with our congratulatory team." Congratulatory team? Nangongja was a bit strange. "I don't know who the congratulatory team is." Seeing the doubts in Nangongja's heart, Kanzuya immediately began to explain. "It's like this. Our Tang Ren and Woodleaf Village have been ninja villages for generations. So when Woodleaf Village has a happy event, our Tang Ren will send a congratulatory team to congratulate them. For example, when the Hokage ascends to the throne, our Tang Ren will send a team to Woodleaf Village to cooperate with the Woodleaf Village. This time, the fourth Hokage ascends to the throne. Because the war just ended, Tang Ren also had a lot of problems in the war. In order to solve the internal problems, Tang Ren didn't send anyone to attend the ceremony. These days, I heard that the fourth Hokage and his wife's child is about to be born. We wanted to send a team of ninja to congratulate them, and at the same time, to express our apology for not attending the ceremony. However, in these days, Nangong Jiaonan, you must have heard a lot of Tang Ren's internal evaluation of me. Many people obey my orders on the surface, but in private they obey in public but oppose in private. Saying that, Kanzuya's face couldn't help but show a lot of bitterness. Mizusawa and I grew up together. He knows my dreams very well. That's why he's always been supporting me. But except for him, I can hardly mobilize the high-level power of Tang Ren. Because Mizusawa wants to protect my safety, I really can't find anyone to protect this congratulatory team. So, I can only ask you to protect this team to Woodleaf Village. The embarrassment and entanglement in Kanzuya's eyes were obvious, and the reason Kanzuya gave to Nangongja was not a big problem. Nangongja thought, since I have decided to face the truth, then it's time to go back. Kanzuya-sama, since you have already said it to this point, I have no reason to refuse. Presumably, Kanzuya-sama also knows that the two girls with me are the employers of the task I am currently carrying out. I need to go back and ask for their opinion. Nangongja didn't rush. After all, he was not alone. Of course. Kanzuya also nodded. Kanzuya stood up and personally sent Nangongja out of the office building. Looking at Nangongja's figure walking away, he didn't say a word. Finally, he sighed and turned to enter the office building. The tall office building looked like a huge fortress at this moment, isolated from the outside world. Chapter 62. Nangongja naturally didn't see Kanzuya's performance. Of course, even if he saw it, he wouldn't care too much. Returning to the hotel, Nangongja saw Linger and Mishiro playing chess in the living room. Speaking of which, there is a need to explain. After coming to the land of hot water, Mishiro and Linger stayed in a good hotel. After Nangongja and Kanzuya met, several of Kanzuya's subordinates took Nangongja to this luxurious villa-like hotel. Nangongja, Mishiro, and Linger all had their own separate rooms. Kitchen, living room, and so on, everything was available. Naturally, there was also the most famous hot spring in the land of hot water. In the center of the house there was a hot spring. It was surrounded by smoke all day long, but it looked very good. Seeing Nangongja enter the door, Mishiro didn't pay attention to him. Instead, she frowned and looked at the chessboard. Mishiro and Linger were playing a chess game that Nangongja learned from his sister. It's called Go. It seems to have a long history, but for various reasons, it's almost impossible to see it in the ninja world. Mishiro. Let's stop for a moment, I have something to discuss with you. Nangongja patted Mishiro's shoulders slightly, indicating that he wanted to talk to her. But Mishiro seemed to be completely immersed in the game, and she slapped Nangongja's hand away. Don't bother me, little Linger, I don't know why. She's so good at chess, but I obviously learned this game longer than her. How can I lose so miserably? Mishiro's strong logic instantly made Nangongja and Linger very embarrassed. Sister, brother seems to be looking for you for a very important matter. Let's stop for a while, I'm a little tired. Go drink some water. Linger said very sensibly. After all, although Nangongja's face wasn't ugly, it wasn't very good either. It felt like he had a lot on his mind. No way. If he had something to do, he would talk about it later. In any case, it wouldn't delay anything. Go. Playing chess is the most important thing. Alright, Mishiro was starting to pester endlessly. At this time, Nangongja and Linger had no choice but to continue playing chess with Mishiro. Under Linger's repeated throwing of the game, the two finally ended in a draw. But after calculating the numbers, Linger still had the advantage. Zhen Ashen's face turned a little sour. Then Nangongja let Linger play by herself for a while. She pulled Mishiro into the study room. Alright, Xiao, Linger isn't here anymore. If you have something to say, just say it. She shook off Nangongja's hand and sat on a bamboo chair in the study room. Well, when I came back this morning, I was called by the leader of the shinobi, you know about it, right? Mishiro nodded, indicating that he knew. Because when Nangongja left, he specifically left a person behind to inform Mishiro and Linger of his whereabouts. The shinobi leader called me to escort a team of shinobi to Woodleaf Village. To congratulate the fourth Hokage, Watergate-sama, on the birth of his child. Nangongja also found a place to sit down and slowly said, So, we're going back to Woodleaf Village soon? Mishiro asked, but his brows slightly wrinkled. I didn't immediately agree because after all, I'm still responsible for escorting you around to collect information. And it's very troublesome to bring Linger to Woodleaf Village. Linger has been living with a Wang in that remote mountain village. She doesn't even have an ID. When Mashiro heard Nangongji's words, his brows relaxed. A girl's mind is always delicate. Seeing Nangongja asking for his opinion, his mood was a lot better. Linger's ID, I can think of a way. It'll be done soon. As a person who can hire a jonin to perform a long-term mission, his social power and wealth can be imagined. So for Mashiro to be able to solve such a problem, Nangongja didn't feel much surprise. There's one more thing, it's about my sister. Nangongja slightly lowered his head so that Mashiro couldn't see his face. Sister? It's been so long. I don't seem to have heard you mention your sister. Indeed, Nangongja and Mashiro have been together for nearly 4 or 5 months. But Nangongja didn't mention that he had a sister. Naturally, Mashiro was sensitive enough to sense that something wasn't quite right. You and your sister? Mashiro didn't say much, but the doubt in his eyes was obvious. Well, as you think. There are a lot of things, but don't worry. I'll solve it. It's been so long, there's no point in dragging it out. Nangongja's attitude was very firm. Nangongja hoped that he could use this opportunity to clear all the disputes between himself and his sister. Since you've decided, then go. When I first came to Woodleaf Village, I only stayed in the outer residential area. Since I'm going with you this time, it's not a bad idea to let you take me to a place further inside. I don't know how it feels to see Woodleaf's famous Shadow Rock up close. Mashiro said and stood up. He opened the door and went to find Ling Er. Nangongja was left alone in the study room, thinking without saying a word. His own life, his own memories. All kinds of doubts, this time at Woodleaf Village, must be cleared up. But Nangongja never thought that pursuing the truth was indeed a good thing. However, if he were to dig too much into the truth, would he end up being hurt by the sharp blade of the truth? But when people were young, they couldn't help but pursue the truth. Was it ignorance or fearlessness? The next day, Nangongja went to Kanzuya's office early in the morning. He told Kanzuya that he could bring Tang Ren's congratulatory team to Woodleaf Village. Kanzuya was extremely grateful and bombarded with all kinds of attentiveness. Nangongja left Tang Ren's office. After that, Nangongja stayed in the hotel. Until Tang Ren's people came to inform Nangongja to leave for Woodleaf, Nangongja was almost silent in the hotel. Originally, Ling Er wanted to ask Nangongja what was going on, but she was pulled back by Mashiro. Because, at this moment, Nangongja was no longer someone who could be helped by simple persuasion. This knot in his heart had to be untied slowly. No matter how much anyone said, it wouldn't have much effect. Nangongja was also very clear that this matter had almost become a huge obstacle in his progress. Chapter 63. The huge convoy has been moving slowly along the wide road. With billowing smoke and a somewhat restless heart, the convoy moved forward under the slightly scorching sun. In fact, Tang Shinobu doesn't know when Yandame's child will be born. After all, whether it's Namikaze Watergate or Uzumaki Shina Kushina, their identities are extremely special. The specific situation of the descendants' arrival is naturally strictly guarded. Tang Shinobu only decided to go to Woodleaf through his own various channels, coupled with the influence of rumors from Woodleaf. After all, Woodleaf is such a big village for a small country like Tang Shinobu. The pressure is too great. Even if Woodleaf reveals a little bit of dissatisfaction, it will make Tang Shinobu fearful. This is the sorrow of the weak in troubled times. Nangongja was facing a somewhat hot evening wind. The weather was a bit strange. Because it's already late autumn, but the weather is inexplicably hot. It seems that even the heavens are foretelling something. Woodleaf? It's been half a year since I went back. I don't know how Roro is doing in the village. Should I not be so obsessed with the fragments in my memory? Nangongja was lying on the roof of the carriage with a dry grass in his mouth, thinking in his heart, but I really want to know what happened. Yes, Nangongja is still tangled in how to face Nangong Ro. Over the years, Nangongja and Nangong Ro's relationship is not just a simple brother and sister relationship. Instead, it's closer, and they almost became the pillar of life between each other. Nangong Ro doesn't like to deal with people. Nangongja is a bit eccentric. It's because of these two people that they can no longer be separated from each other. Nangongja sat up and looked around. It seems that we have entered the territory of the Land of Fire. Woodleaf Village. It's not far away. The whole convoy drove for half a day, and at this moment they were very close to Woodleaf Village. Nangongja was a little anxious, and he actually got rid of the convoy and jumped over the canopy again and again. Originally, Nangongja should see the peaceful scenery of Woodleaf Village. It's the mighty Shadow Rock. But at this moment, Nangongja didn't see these things. Instead, a huge red nine-tails fox raging in Woodleaf Village. Flames were burning everywhere and wails spread all over the village. As far as the eye could see, there were only broken walls and ruins. There were also many corpses. Ro. Nan Gongja instantly felt a little flustered in his heart. How can Nai, a ninja who specializes in medical ninjutsu, protect herself? Suddenly, Nan Gongja's heart was burning with anxiety. Li Yang. Nan Gongja summoned Li Yang. The shrunken Li Yang looked around and wanted to ask something, but she was interrupted by Nan Gongja's voice. The village was attacked and I'm worried about Ro's safety. You go and inform the convoy to stop moving. I'll go find Ro and protect her safety. Nan Gongja quickly said. As soon as his voice fell, Li Yang couldn't see Nan Gongja's figure. Li Yang also knew that the situation was critical, so she didn't show her usual nagging nature, but quickly ran in the direction of the convoy. Not to mention the various matters after Li Yang arrived at the convoy. Nan Gongja anxiously ran to the place where he and Nan Ro lived, only to find a broken wall. Even the fire on the wooden structure of the house had been extinguished. This was enough to prove that the house had been destroyed for a long time. However, after Nan Gongja used a small amount of internal strength in his body to strengthen his 5 senses, he found that Nan Ro couldn't be in the ashes. So he immediately looked around. Finally, near 9 Tails, Nan Gongja found Nan Ro. Nan Ro was currently bandaging the wound of an injured ninja. Ro. Nan Gongja couldn't help but call out. Hearing the familiar voice, Nan Ro also turned around and saw Nan Gongja. Brother? In an instant, Nan Gongja almost used his fastest speed to rush to Nan Ro's side. He hugged Nan Ro. I just went to take a look at our house and found that it was all in ruins. I was so worried about you at that time. Fortunately, I found you so quickly. Nan Gongja hugged Nan Ro tightly as if this was the only way to express his feelings. I don't want to think about anything now. I just want you to live a safe and sound life. Nan Ro felt Nan Gongja's words at this moment. Suddenly she felt a little complicated. Nan Ro shouldn't have been able to understand the reason why Nan Gongja stayed away from Woodleaf at that time. However, it had been so long. From Nan Gongja's various abnormal behaviors at that time, she could guess most of it. Okay. Nan Ro buried her head in Nan Gongja's broad shoulders, suddenly feeling that this was the only place that made her feel most at ease. If Nan Gongja really found out the truth, it was actually not all a bad thing. Because as long as that was the case, she and Nan Gongja could... No, how could she think of such shameless things? Be careful. Nan Gongja suddenly roared. He pushed Nan Ro, who was in his arms, to the side. He didn't even have time to pull out the black sword on his back, and could only rely on the gauntlet on his arm to protect himself. That's right, 9 Tails, who was wreaking havoc in the surroundings, suddenly became more violent at this moment. It wasn't just the 4 sharp claws that were constantly destroying the surrounding environment. 9 Tails also carried a huge force as it swept around in all directions. Furthermore, an even bigger chakra bomb was condensing in 9 Tails' huge mouth. Even Nan Gongja couldn't resist the huge force. He could only be thrown to the ground heavily, splashing a huge amount of dust. What was more dangerous was that Nan Gongja's precarious balance between the inner energy and the sword energy in his body had already collapsed at this moment. The sword energy was wreaking havoc in his body, and the inner energy was constantly exerting its power to repair Nan Gongja's body. Nan Ro quickly ran over and looked at Nan Gongja's bulging veins. She frowned immediately. Possessed. At this moment, Nan Ro vaguely understood Nan Gongja's current situation. In order to calm Nan Gongja's sword energy, she quickly took out a crystal that was emitting a blue light from a small pouch that she carried with her. This is the life-saving item that grandfather left behind. I thought that it would take a long time for brother to cultivate to this stage, but I didn't expect it to be so fast. At this moment, Nan Ro's eyes didn't show the joy of solving the problem. Instead, there was an unusual seriousness in her eyes. Chapter 64. Looking at Nan Gongja's frowning brows, Nan Ro could almost feel his pain. His entire body was being destroyed by the power that he had cultivated bit by bit. He felt his tendons, bones, and flesh being eroded bit by bit. Even the legendary 100 poisons devouring the body couldn't be compared to this, right? However, once this crystal was used, the consequences might be even more serious. Being possessed by the devil was actually the sword energy going berserk. As long as he was willing to give up his cultivation, seal his meridians, and use secret medicine, he could still save his life. However, the price to pay for this was the loss of his cultivation, and he would become a cripple. He couldn't even walk, sit, or lie down. Brother, after so many years, I think I understand you. If I ask you to live the rest of your life like a cripple, you definitely won't be willing. Nangong Ro's small hand clenched the crystal even more tightly. If I were to choose, I would want you to live. But if I were to choose for you, I would want you to die for yourself. Nangong Ro raised the crystal high. Brother, you've been working hard for me these past few years, doing a lot of things you didn't want to do. You've killed a lot of people you didn't want to kill. In the future, don't do this again. Live for your own sake. The sparkling light turned into streams of light, twining around Nangong Ro. The streams of light slowly converged into the crystal held high by Nangong Ro, and the blue light shone even more brightly. Grandfather, you wanted brother to recover so that he could protect me. So, you secretly left a seed in the internal energy you transferred to brother. Once brother tried to reverse the internal energy, the seed would be activated. It would quickly convert all the internal energy from you into sword energy. However, grandfather, you never thought that brother would become brother. He became a member of Woodleaf. All kinds of dangerous situations and brother's hard work made the internal energy in brother's body exceed the internal energy you transferred to him. So, the sword energy didn't have a complete advantage in the battle in the body. This crystal is the control device of the sword energy seed. At the same time, it's also the central device that mediates the internal energy and sword energy. I will now use my life energy to activate it. I hope that I can bring Oniai-san a glimmer of hope to continue to roam the ninja world with a sword. The light of the crystal finally reached its peak. Brother, wake up again. Nangong Ro pressed the crystal between Nangong's eyebrows. The seemingly sturdy crystal shattered in an instant. Instantly, it turned into a blue mist and enveloped Nangong's body. Bit by bit, the light mist merged into every inch of Nangong's body. At this moment, the violent sword aura and the weak inner strength had calmed down. Nangong's sword chi was slowly extracted, and the painful expression on his face gradually eased. Countless strands of sword chi that had been drawn out were wandering around Nangongja. But for a moment, it turned into a sword energy dragon. Stroking Nangong's body, it floated in the air. The sword energy dragon was getting bigger and bigger, thicker and thicker. It even slowly became as thick as Nine-Tails' tail. Countless people's eyes began to focus on Nangong's place. Who is that person? At this moment, Yandame Hokage Watergate also noticed the special scene behind Nine-Tails. Originally, Watergate had consumed a lot of energy to resist Nine-Tails' Baijidama and the Masked Man's attack. But in order to stop Nine-Tails' rampage, Watergate could only fight with Nine-Tails. The hand seal in his hand was half-formed, but he put it down. Even ants drag out their lives, let alone Watergate. He had a wife who loved him and a newborn child. Even if Shina Kushina was the Nine-Tails' column force at this moment, her life was in danger. But as long as Watergate was willing, there were still many ways to extend Shina Kushina's life. At this moment, the sword energy dragon outside Nangong's body gave Watergate a glimmer of hope to live with his family. Something's not right. The sword energy dragon has been hovering in the sky for a long time, but it never attacked Nine-Tails' demon fox. It just hovered on its own. And Nangongja? He was still unconscious. Because at this moment, Nangongja was paying attention to the changes in his body. Originally, the sword energy had destroyed the tendons and flesh in his body. His internal energy had also started to weaken, and many damaged parts had not been repaired in time. But suddenly, a strange blue energy entered Nangong's body. The sword energy that enveloped his body was slowly extracted. But not all of the sword energy was extracted. Instead, there was a considerable amount of sword energy left in his body. The internal energy that had been suppressed to the point of death was now like a hungry tiger, instantly wrapping around the remaining sword energy. Slowly, the sword energy was eaten away and digested. And the internal energy also started to have some characteristics of the sword energy. Showing off his ability, the black sword that had fallen to the ground when he was slapped away. Now, under the dual guidance of the internal energy and the sword energy, it was suspended in the air. It was waiting for its master to hold it again and conquer the world. Roar! Nangong's eyes suddenly opened and he let out a long howl. Along with the sword's clanging sound, it was like a dragon's roar resounding through the sky. Subconsciously, Nangongja reached out his hand. The black sword seemed to have a mind of its own, and it landed in Nangongja's hand. At this moment, Nangongja's consciousness was still fuzzy. He was just following his instincts and calling for his parts. The huge body of Nine Tails was now a target in Nangong's eyes. Slash. Nangongja did not roar, nor did he have any emotional fluctuations. He just waved the black sword gently, and the sword energy dragon rushed toward Nine Tails under the guidance of his internal energy. The sword energy dragon, as the name suggested, was made up of sword energy that specialized in killing. Therefore one could imagine its power. Just as the sword energy dragon was about to hit Nine Tails' body, it began to disintegrate. It was not that the sword energy dragon did not have enough power and dissipated on its own. But this was the only way to display the strongest power of the sword energy. Countless sword energy twined around Nine Tails' body. No one knew how much of Nine Tails' fiery red hair was cut off. There were even many small wounds on Nine Tails' body. The nine-tailed beast had a strong recovery ability. But at this moment the speed of recovery was far slower than the speed of injury. Wounds covered Nine Tails' body. Chapter 65. Sword Ki is a killing technique, so it naturally has an advantage when attacking. At this moment, the Sword Ki dragon has fully proved this point. After all, even the tailed beast, one of the 9 great weapons of the shinobi world, has suffered a lot of losses under the Sword Ki. However, the effect caused by the Sword Ki dragon was only temporary. These Sword Ki were forcibly extracted from Nangongja's body by the smoke formed by the blue crystal. Although Nangongja can use the Sword Ki dragon to attack Nine Tails to a certain extent by absorbing some of the Sword Ki characteristics of the Nangongja. But all of this is still a rootless tree, a water without a source. It can be a hero for a while, but it won't last long. After a while, the Sword Ki that was originally wrapped around Nine Tails' body has become thin. Roar! Nine Tails roared, and his limbs suddenly exerted force. All the chakra contained in his body burst out in an instant, and the powerful chakra formed a huge wind. You despicable humans! You dare to control me, dare to hurt me. After that bastard Madara, who dares to do this? Nine Tails' roar resounded over the entire shinobi village. I want you to die. Nine Tails' momentary venting seemed to have given the wood leaf the key to the truth. Control? The Kyuubi was actually manipulated by someone to attack Konoha? Thinking about it, Nine Tails was defeated by the wood leaf's first Hokage, Senju Takuma. Even Nine Tails' column force was the wife of the first Hokage. Although the Uzumaki family seal is very powerful, they still have some knowledge of the outside world. Konoha continued to produce many talented ninjas, and many secret jutsu and forbidden tomes were researched and developed by them. When fighting against other shinobi villages, they simply beat all the other shinobi villages with their strength. No matter how powerful the tailed beast is, in the end they are still beasts and they must follow the nature of beasts. How can they not know to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages? It seems that all of this is related to the masked man who claims to be Uchiha Madara? Watergate couldn't help but think of the strange masked ninja who released Nine Tails and can use space ninjutsu. At this moment, Sandame, who was leading Konoha's shinobi to rescue, also returned to Minato's side. Watergate. Thanks to Nangongja's sudden outburst, I've saved many villagers who couldn't save themselves. Hearing 3 generations of the tailed beast, Ninja, Watergate nodded. Ninjas in the Woodleaf village. There's ninjas Woodleaf of ninjas as well. Although they are not ninjas, a large number of them are elite craftsmen, nobles, or wealthy merchants. Such people choose to settle in Woodleaf to ensure their own safety or to issue important tasks. If they lose this important prerequisite, then Woodleaf will have a great loss in logistics and the number of tasks. This is a matter of face for Woodleaf, and it can't be lost for a Hokage. Therefore, Watergate is willing to take a great risk and let the 3 generations of the tailed beast, who has retired to the second line, rescue them. But I think Nangongja's current outburst can't last long. The storm formed by the sword energy has begun to disintegrate, and we need to find a way to deal with it. As Shui Men spoke, there was a trace of determination in his eyes. Obviously he has made up his mind. You mean, corpse demon seal? Sandame suddenly remembered that Minato had been studying an ancient sacrificial seal from the Uzumaki clan, which was similar to that of a sacrificial seal. Watergate nodded, and even his hands began to print. Sandame looked at Watergate with complicated eyes. Watergate can be said to be the most qualified ninja Sandame has ever seen in his life. He is not blinded by the killing of ninjas all day long, and he keeps his heart unchanged. He is willing to open his heart to everyone, let himself turn into a flame to warm others and illuminate others. But at the same time he will not be affected by his own emotions. When it comes to making a choice, he will not be impulsive and will always look at the overall situation. However, is he really going to watch such a young and energetic person fall in front of him? No. He is already old and there are few things he can do. Although he can help Watergate suppress a lot of the older generation so that they can't cause any trouble. But for Watergate, isn't it just a little trouble? Watergate, don't be impulsive. Sandame stepped forward, trying to stop Watergate. Your child has just been born, and Shinakushina is also in an extremely dangerous situation. You give up your life like this, isn't it unfair to your child? Isn't it unfair to Shinakushina? Yes, you are a ninja. But before that, you are still a person, a father. You are living up to your responsibilities as a ninja, but what about other responsibilities? The Sandame has been the Hokage for so long, and he has seen too much of Konoha's secrets and dark secrets that are hard to look at directly. The 3 generations of the tailed beast also forced his best disciple Orochimaru to leave. Studying ninjutsu involves a lot of problems with the human body, so how can it be done without human anatomy? Although on the surface, the major ninja villages resist this kind of behavior. But who dares to say that they haven't done it in private? A ninja is only valuable if he is alive. Dead. Isn't that just a corpse? 3 generations, Sama, I know everything you said. But Watergate turned his head and looked at the 3 generations. His eyes were even full of tears. I have been a ninja for so long, I have gradually forgotten what a person should be like. Yes, this is the kind of person who grew up in a ninja village, a place where military power is concentrated. No matter how strong their self-regulation ability is, there are always flaws. Even Watergate is no exception. Child. Then learn slowly, just like you are learning a very rare ninjutsu. Nothing is born with knowledge, everything is learned little by little. You have no parents since you were a child, and you must be worried about whether you will be a qualified father. In fact, there was no need for Minato to use such a powerful sealing technique as the corpse demon seal. Because Kyuubi had just left the body of the Jinchuriki, and a large part of his power had not yet recovered, he was already controlled. Unable to recover his chakra to the maximum efficiency, he finally regained his consciousness. But because of Nangong's sword chi dragon, Kyuubi got rid of Nangong's control. After that, he suffered a lot of injuries under the sword chi storm. In order to get rid of the last bit of sword chi, he stimulated the remaining chakra in anger. Now Nine Tails can be said to be at the bottom of his strength. The opportunity to win has appeared. Chapter 66. Just when Sandame wanted to say something to Watergate, Nine Tails' eyes turned into 3 Tomo again. Kyuubi was being manipulated once again. Its huge mouth opened again and a new Bijidama was ready to be released. However, it was obvious that Nine Tails wasn't in the right state at this moment. The Bijidama was different from the previous dazzling light, it was flickering. It was obvious that although the chakra in Nine Tails' body was huge, it had also fallen into a trough. It was obvious that the person who manipulated Nine Tails was anxious. The sudden burst of sword chi disrupted the masked man's plan. In a hidden forest. At this moment, the masked man was standing on top of a tall tree. Wood leaf on fire was reflected in the masked man's only exposed eye. A constantly rotating 3 Tomo Sharingan also revealed the masked man's somewhat anxious heart. It seems that your plan isn't going very well. A joking voice sounded behind the masked man, and at the same time, a huge pitcher plant rose from the ground. It was obvious that the words just now were said by Zetsu. Hearing Zetsu's words, the masked man didn't say anything. But his somewhat chaotic breathing clearly showed that the masked man's heart was not calm. I always thought that your plan was a bit rushed. Although Nine Tails is very powerful. But it's a bit wishful thinking to want to destroy Wood Leaf with just 9 tails. Zetsu walked to the masked man's side and kept talking. Right now, it's just a little famous Nangong's outbreak then. If Sandame, who is known as the ninjutsu professor who can single-handedly change the situation of the battle, goes all out, what kind of level will he be? Even if Sandame is not clear about how strong he is, you should be very clear about the power of the Yandame, right? That's it for this time. Anyway, it's not a big investment, but it's clear that Wood Leaf's strength is real, and it also caused a certain amount of damage. Not bad, just take it as a small lesson for Wood Leaf. The masked man snorted coldly, and the Magatama in his eyes stopped spinning. He turned around and walked into the deep and dark forest. This person is really impulsive. White Zoo looked at the masked man's back and couldn't help but say, "Isn't it good? You and I both know how little experience he has. If it really is that shrewd, you and I will have a lot of trouble controlling it." This was perfect. Our priority now is not to fight with him, but to determine who the next column force is. Black Zetsu heard White Zetsu's nagging and he voiced his opinion. That's true. Right now, the most important thing for us is to pay attention to who column force is. White Zetsu obviously agreed with Black Zetsu. On the other hand, Nine Tails, under the control of the masked man, went berserk again after releasing a Bijudama that wasn't perfectly charged. It was just that it instinctively started to destroy everything. And Nangongja? When Nine Tails' Sword Chi Dragon exploded, Nangongja fell from the sky. Nangong Ro was taking care of her at this moment. Fourth generation Head and Sandaime seemed to have come to a conclusion after a short period of communication. Passed down the order for the whole barrier class to gather. Sandaime waved his hand, showing the style of a ninja hero. Yes. A few of the bodyguards immediately knelt down and accepted the order. They scattered in an instant. 3 generations Head. Then let us first restrict Nine Tails' movement. Weaken Nine Tails' physical strength, and wait for the rest of the barrier class to gather. Fourth generation Head said, and his hands began to form seals. Summoning technique. Come out, Toad Wentai. A huge cloud of smoke rose and Toad Wentai's figure appeared. Watergate boy. It's actually Nine Tails. Wentai stretched out his claws and pointed at the similarly huge creature in front of him. But the situation doesn't seem right? Has he lost his mind? And his strength doesn't seem to be as strong as the rumors say? Watergate nodded, indicating that Wentai was right. Previously, Nine Tails was controlled by someone, and used up too much of his chakra. Moreover, Nangongja in our village suddenly exploded, and caused a huge loss to Nine Tails. Nine Tails was controlled time and time again, and now his mind is in a mess. Watergate jumped up and stood on top of Wentai's head. Let's block him for a while, and then we'll work together with the entire barrier class to seal Nine Tails. Ah! Fighting with the legendary Nine-tailed beast really makes me excited. Wentai roared, pulled out his short sword from his back, and began to fight with Nine Tails. Minato also cooperated with Wentai's attack and began to use Flying Thunder God Jutsu again, and then used Rasengan to cause damage to Kyubi. Looking at Watergate's performance at this moment, Sandaime suddenly began to feel a little excited, and he remembered how he felt when he was on the battlefield. Ah! Then I can't let Watergate monopolize the limelight. These old bones of mine can still give it a try. The third king's hands began to form hand seals. Spirit communication technique. Ape demon. A huge ape appeared in the smoke. Yuan Fei, you haven't called me out for a long time. The ape demon was obviously a cheerful person, and when he saw Sandaime, he immediately greeted him happily. It's been a while after all, I've retired. There are fewer battles, but today you and I still need to fight side by side, let's go all out. Yuan Fei said, pointing his finger at Nine Tails, who was fighting with Watergate. I didn't expect that there would be a day when I would fight with Nine Tails. But Watergate boy is really powerful now. You have chosen a good successor. Sandaime stretched out his hand, and the ape demon immediately understood the meaning of 3 generations. It turned into a huge weapon called Golden Staff. Don't think so much, this time I can finally have a good fight. Every ninja has a warlike gene flowing in their body. It may not be obvious at ordinary times, but once it's time to fight, everyone will be very excited. Just like 3 generations, he is usually like an amiable grandfather. But once the fight starts, his whole spirit condenses into one. It's like a humanoid weapon born for war. Ha ha ha. With a roar, the Jingu Bang in his hand changed according to his will, becoming bigger and longer. It smashed towards Nine Tails with a large front and a small back. The huge force even caused Kyubi to stagger. There were even traces of blood seeping out from the places where the Jingu Bang had struck. The fighting power of 3 generations is so fierce. Chapter 67. 3 generations and 4 generations were fighting fiercely against Nine Tails, and the fierce battle also inspired the confidence of many Woodleaf ninjas. Suddenly, the Woodleaf ninjas were fighting back and forth with Nine Tails. Victory seemed to be not far away. However, Yondaime-sama and Sandaime-sama are also very clear in their hearts that this is just a temporary situation. The moves they used were all ninjutsu, so they could suppress Nine Tails for a while. But it was wishful thinking to defeat Nine Tails. For this almost immortal tailed beast, the best solution was still to seal him. Reporting to Hokage-sama. The sealing team is in place. A ninja suddenly appeared behind Watergate and reported to Watergate on one knee. Very good, 3 generations and I will now try our best to restrict Nine Tails' activities. The ninjutsu team will suppress Nine Tails from a distance, and the sealing team will find an opportunity to seal Nine Tails. Watergate said, but he seemed to have a plan in mind. He waved his hand. He called the ninja kneeling next to him and whispered something in his ear. The ninja's expression changed, but he still bowed his head. He disappeared in a flash. 3 generations also came to 4 generations' side at this moment. What should I do now? After all, 3 generations had already abdicated, and they had to lower their attitude in front of Watergate. This was the basic respect for the position of Hokage. 3 generations, Sama, you and I will try our best to restrict Nine Tails' movements. 3 generations nodded, indicating that they understood. But after thinking about it, they opened their mouth and asked their doubts. Who are you going to seal Nine Tails on? Column Force's requirements are very strict. Your apprentice Rin was forced to seal Nine Tails because she didn't meet Column Force's requirements. In the end, Kakashi. The 3 generations did not continue, but the meaning behind their words was clear. To become a human Column Force, one's body, chakra, and other aspects were very demanding. It required a long selection process, and it was best to officially become a human Column Force at a young age. Only in this way could he adapt to the tailed beast's chakra to the greatest extent and display the advantage of the human Column Force. 3 generations, please don't worry. I already have a plan for this matter. The candidate for the next Jinchuriki will be here soon. Watergate waved his hand, looking very calm. 3 generations didn't say anything when they saw how confident Watergate was. Then, ninjutsu, shadow clone jutsu. The 3 generations had a total of 20 doppelgangers. After seeing the 3 generations' actions, Watergate also understood the 3 generations' intentions. Good. Then I will also. Ninjutsu, shadow clone jutsu. Watergate also had 20 shadow clones. Each of Watergate's doppelgangers stood beside the 3 generations' doppelgangers and grabbed the shoulders of the 3 generations' doppelgangers. One-hand seal. Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Watergate's signature ninjutsu was instantly released, and 3 generations' doppelgangers appeared in all directions of Nine Tails. But how did the Flying Thunder God's mark spread around Nine Tails? Watergate had been fighting with Nine Tails for a long time before. The special Flying Thunder God's kunai were also scattered around the battlefield. At this moment, it was not a problem to take 3 generations' doppelgangers everywhere. Watergate and 3 generations' doppelgangers nodded to each other and began to stand on both sides of Nine Tails' huge head. Bind! A loud shout came from the Watergate and reverberated throughout the battlefield. A special steel wire was shot out from the hands of 3 generations and Watergate and into the hands of the doppelgangers on the opposite side. Chakra was constantly wandering in the steel wire, activating the runes engraved on the steel wire. No matter what attribute the chakra was, it began to transform into lightning chakra with paralysis attribute at this moment. Although Nine Tails' body was made of chakra, it still had flesh and blood. It would bleed and hurt. Naturally, it would also feel a sense of paralysis. The steel wire wrapped around Nine Tails' body as well as the constant lightning chakra, consumed Nine Tails' stamina. For a moment, Nine Tails' limbs went soft. He almost fell to the ground. Now! The 4th and 3 generations shouted at the same time. The sealing class finished their preparations and instantly opened the huge scrolls on their backs. One by one, the scrolls extended to a length that obviously did not match the width of the scroll. Following the guidance of the steel wire, it began to spread to Nine Tails' body. The ninjas who were still using ninjutsu to suppress Nine Tails' movement also stopped releasing ninjutsu. Instead, they spread out and stood behind the sealing class ninjas. Using their hands to transfer chakra to the sealing class ninjas was a huge consumption. The text on the scroll wrapped around Nine Tails' body seemed to come alive under a large amount of chakra. It kept wandering around the area covered by the scroll. The text seemed to have a faint light. It showed how powerful the sealing technique was. Nine Tails' body seemed to be shrinking visibly. Very good. 3 generations, Sama, let's also do our best. Seeing that the situation was good, the 4th said to the 3 generations. The 3 generations is known as the ninjutsu professor, and Watergate's wife, Uzumaki Shina Kushina, is the successor of the famous Uzumaki clan's sealing technique. Both of them have a certain understanding of sealing technique, coupled with the huge chakra of the 2 Kage level. In an instant, the sealing speed of the sealing technique increased rapidly. In less than half an hour, Nine Tails was compressed into a ball by the sealing technique. At this moment, the ninja who Watergate just whispered to also came to Watergate's side with a baby in his arms. The three generations used their eyesight to see the conspicuous golden hair in an instant. Watergate. That's your child who was born not long ago. You want to use him as the column force of Nine Tails? The three generations were shocked for a moment. The most suitable physique to seal Nine Tails was originally the physique of the Uzumaki clan. And the Uzumaki clan is now in decline, and their descendants are drifting in the ninja world. It was a coincidence that we were able to find Shinakushina. And because Shinakushina was forcibly separated from the Nine Tails, even with the tyrannical physique of the Uzumaki clan, her body can no longer withstand the resealing of Nine Tails. So, now the only one who can seal Nine Tails and become the column force is my child with Shinakushina. Watergate said slowly, but his tone was particularly firm. The sadness in his eyes can be seen even by others. Becoming the column force means abandoning the life of an ordinary person. Becoming a professional humanoid weapon. Even with the care of Watergate and the three generations, the child will not become a brainwashed killing machine. But it won't be much better. Becoming the column force is a huge responsibility and burden. He had personally pushed his child onto this path of no return. As a father, the sadness in his heart was self-evident. Chapter 68. My child with Shinakushina. Looking at his child in his arms, Watergate couldn't help but mutter to himself. Obviously, his eyes haven't opened yet, but Watergate felt that his child's eyes must be like the stars in the night sky, bright and shining. Dad, I've always been proud of being a ninja of Konoha. Even if I have encountered danger countless times and violated my heart countless times. But I have never regretted being a ninja. He stretched out his hand and gently pulled the swaddling cloth that had slipped off. Today I will once again go against my own heart because I am a ninja. I will send my child on a road that is destined to be full of ups and downs. But Dad believes that you will be strong enough to make a world for yourself. If there is a reason, then it must be because you are the son of the fourth Hokage of Woodleaf, Watergate. You are a son of flame who has inherited the will of fire of Woodleaf. After Watergate finished this sentence, he turned his head, looking at the ninjas in the enchantment class. Now, start the Nine Tails sealing ceremony. A loud and clear voice instantly resounded through the sky. Every ninja in the enchantment class as well as the ninja in the chakra class was full of pride at this moment. This is the Nine Tails. The Nine Tails, the first of the nine-tailed beasts. Since the death of Konoha's first Hokage, no one has been able to suppress such a powerful existence. At this very moment, they were about to witness this historic moment. Even the calmest person was extremely agitated at this moment. Yes. 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 The excited shouts of many ninjas instantly drowned out the struggling screams of Nine Tails. Everyone was so excited. Because after this battle, the glory of defeating Nine Tails will accompany him for the rest of his life. But the louder the excited shouts around him, the more sad Yandame's heart was. Using his son's life in exchange for the stability of Woodleaf. As a father, how pitiful was that? Ninjutsu class. Follow my chakra's guidance and begin sealing Nine Tails. However, the fourth generation couldn't say anything. Instead, he was more excited than anyone else. At the very least, he has to pretend to be more excited than anyone else, because Hokage doesn't represent himself, but the entire Woodleaf ninja force. The desire of this group is the desire of Hokage. As long as they weren't mediocre people, they would be respected. They were all people who were forced by their responsibilities. Watergate increased the output of chakra and used his chakra as a marker. He guided the rest of the ninjas to seal Nine Tails. Since he had decided to let his son become column force, then, he naturally had to do his best to fulfill the best conditions. The seal used by Watergate was based on the inheritance of the Uzumaki clan and Watergate's design. It was a super sealing technique called the Four Symbols Seal. Using the power of the four symbols of heaven and earth to suppress everything. Slowly, Nine Tails, which was originally the size of a house, shrank even more at this moment. Just when Nine Tails was almost suppressed to the extreme, Watergate once again increased the output of chakra. Now, Nine Tails will turn from real to virtual and be sealed again. Hearing Watergate's words, many ninjas also desperately began to output their chakra. Child. Father will add an even more powerful weight to you. Biting the tip of his tongue, a sweet taste instantly spread in his mouth. Watergate used his tongue to carve a seal on his upper jaw. He opened his mouth, and a blood-colored streamer instantly penetrated the sphere formed by Nine Tails. This was a talisman that Watergate spent 10 years of his life to carve with his powerful chakra and deep understanding of sealing techniques. It was a gate that led to the depths of Nine Tails chakra. From then on, as long as Watergate's child can cultivate to the highest level. Even if Nine Tails doesn't release his chakra to support column force, Watergate's child can forcibly extract Nine Tails chakra. From then on, Nine Tails consciousness will become a clay bodhisattva, which can only be seen but useless. Watching the sphere slowly become transparent, as if it turned into a transparent fiery glass. Watergate waved his hand and guided Nine Tails into his child's body with chakra. Furthermore, it was sealed tightly. After doing all this, Watergate spat a mouthful of blood to the sky. He fell to the ground weak. Master said that a child of prophecy will appear in this world. When the world is about to die, the child of shinobi will save the entire shinobi world. At one time, Master thought that I was the so-called child of prophecy. But it turns out that I'm not. Because all I can do is to protect the piece of wood leaf. I don't know who the real child of prophecy is. But he must be a member of the next generation of ninja. Master once wrote a novel. The name of the protagonist in the novel is Naruto. That's the ninja character I've always dreamed of. I hope that one day my child can also become such a ninja. So, my child will be called Naruto from now on. After saying these words, Watergate fainted due to overexertion. Watergate. Watergate. Seeing Watergate fall to the ground, 3 generations lost their virginity for a moment. But then they began to shout Watergate's name and turned their heads and shouted, "Medical class, come here." After a long time, the medical class who dared to come checked Watergate's body. They said, reporting to 3 generations, Sama Hokage-sama's body is fine. It's just excessive consumption, and it seems that he used a secret technique which consumed a lot of his lifespan. His body can't bear it and he fainted under self-protection. As long as he takes good care of himself, he will naturally be fine. After listening to the report of the medical class, 3 generations instantly relaxed. But as if thinking of something, he asked, "Then, what's the situation with Shinakushina?" When the medical ninja leader heard this question, his face instantly became bitter. The situation is very bad. Originally, as a human, column force wouldn't be able to survive after his tailed beast was forcibly extracted. But Shinakushina-sama relied on her strong vitality, and our medical class's full support. For the time being, we can only hold on to a glimmer of hope. If we want to recover, maybe. Hearing the medical ninja leader's hesitant answer, 3 generations felt a little irritated. "Say it. What do you need? I'll try my best. At all costs, we must save Shinakushina's life." After listening, the medical ninja's face didn't disappear. Medicine or something for the current Shinakushina-sama, it's not that useful. In the ninja world, there's only one person who can save Shinakushina-sama. Although he didn't finish, the answer was already obvious. The key to saving Shinakushina is the Princess of Woodleaf, Tsunade Haim. Chapter 69. When he heard Tsunade's name, Sandame's face changed. Everyone said that Tsunade left the Woodleaf because her loved ones died protecting the Woodleaf. She left the Woodleaf because she was heartbroken. But, as a veteran ninja who had experienced World War II and World War III, she was very strong. Was her psychological quality really that weak? You know, whether it was Seiya or her brother. After they died, although Tsunade also had a sad reaction and even suffered from sepsis because of psychological trauma. But everything was limited to that. Tsunade's departure, whether it was because of the Woodleaf or because she had done too many sad things. The Woodleaf was planted by Tsunade's grandfather Senju Takuma and protected by Tsunade's second grandfather Tobarama. Unknowingly, it had been eroded by worms. It was no longer the place where Tsunade grew up. That was the fundamental reason why Tsunade left the Woodleaf. Since only Tsunade can save Shinakushina, then I'll think of a way. You just have to try your best to preserve Shinakushina's life until Tsunade comes back. The 3 generations' face was unusually heavy when they spoke. The medical ninja leader didn't dare to say anything. After all, Tsunade was his direct superior, and the 3 generations was Tsunade's master. He was just a medical ninja, so he couldn't say anything about it. After answering yes, the medical ninja leader disappeared with a body flicker technique. The Sandame heaved a heavy sigh and disappeared as well. When Nangongja opened his eyes again, he saw a strange white ceiling. His body was unbelievably heavy, as if it was filled with lead. He tried to make a sound, but he could only make a hoarse and low hiss. At this time, something seemed to move on his left. Nangongja turned his head and found Nangong Ro lying on the bed. Her clothes were a little dirty. Obviously it was the clothes she wore when she fought Nine Tails. Maybe she heard Nangong's low hiss? Nangong raised her head and looked at Nangongja, who was lying on the bed. She looked at Nangongja and seemed to want to say something. She noticed Nangongja's dry lips. Nangong hurriedly stood up in a panic. Looking at Nangong's figure leaving, Nangongja suddenly felt a burst of tiredness. Then Nangongja fell into a deep sleep. He tried to open his eyes and make a sound. But vaguely he felt a chill in his mouth, and then he didn't feel anything more. When Nangongja broke free from the darkness again and opened his eyes, Nangongja was shocked. He immediately used his greatest strength to turn his head, trying to see Nangong's figure. However, the person that entered his eyes was not Nangong. It was Mishiro, who came back from Yuzakura with him. Seeing Nangongja looking at her, Mishiro immediately stood up in a panic and grabbed Nangongja's hand. "Miyagi, you're awake. Do you want to drink water?" Mishiro said, and was about to let go of Nangongja's hand. She went to the bedside table and picked up the full water bottle. But Nangongja tried to hold Mishiro's hand and squeezed Mishiro's little hand. "Ro," a word came out of Nangongja's mouth. Mishiro quickly reacted. Nangongja was looking for his sister. "Are you looking for Nangong-ro?" Mishiro asked tentatively. Nangongja heard Mishiro's question and shook his head vigorously. Mishiro looked at Nangongja's struggling face and didn't want to turn around to get water. Instead, he sat on the edge of Nangongja's bed and stretched out his hand to stroke Nangongja's messy hair. "It's okay, Nangong-ro just went to work. When Nine Tails attacked the village, many people were injured. In order to take care of you, Nangong-ro stayed by your bed for a day and a night. When Ling-er and I followed Kagekyure's delegation to Woodleaf Village, Nangong-ro was already very tired. I told her that I knew you, so I discussed with her to take care of you." After listening to Mishiro's words, Nangongja let go of Mishiro's hand. "Are you relieved?" Mishiro suddenly smiled. "You're just like the sister complex I heard. You're so sad for your sister. Can't you pay more attention to me?" Mishiro said halfway, and his beautiful mouth pouted. Obviously he was somewhat dissatisfied. Nangongja opened his mouth and wanted to say something. But because of the injuries on his body, he couldn't say a complete word for a long time. It was always a sound that couldn't be heard clearly. Seeing Nangongja's anxious look, Mishiro stretched out his hand and gently flicked Nangongja's forehead with his finger. "Fool, can't you see that I'm teasing you? Look at how anxious you are." After flicking Nangongja's forehead, Mishiro's face suddenly smiled. Just like the warm sun in winter, it was so beautiful that it made people feel intoxicated. Nangongja was a little dazed for a while. "You don't think so much. Just focus on recovering. Nangong-ro and I also talked about some things about you. This can be said to be the most serious injury you've suffered since you became a ninja. So, don't think so much, just focus on recovering. I heard that 3 generations have already gone to find Tsunade-sama and want her to come back to treat the wounded. As long as Tsunade-sama comes back, you'll be able to recover faster." Hearing Mishiro's words, Nangongja also relaxed for a while. When he was in the sand battlefield, Nangongja was very clear about how magical Tsunade's medical ninjutsu was. She was obviously a ninja with hematophobia, but she could perform surgery without causing a trace of bleeding. No one would believe such a thing even if he told them about it. Mishiro also saw that Nangongja's mood was relaxed at the moment, so he stood up, picked up the kettle on the table next to him and poured a glass of water. Gently, as if he was protecting a fragile glass. He slowly helped Nangongja from lying down, one hand on Nangongja's back. The other hand held the cup and slowly fed Nangongja water. Cough. As if he choked, Nangongja coughed slightly. Mishiro immediately patted Nangongja's back and said softly, don't worry. Let's drink slowly." Mishiro was gentle like a warm spring, wrapping Nangongja's whole body. Chapter 70. After Nangongja woke up, he began a series of rehabilitation exercises. Nangong-ro, who came to visit later, said that Tsunade-sama had been found by Jiraiya-sama. But it seems that Tsunade didn't appear in public. Except for a few seriously injured ninjas, Tsunade didn't treat anyone else. It seems that Tsunade-sama has now made up her mind to leave Woodleaf. Nangongja remembered Tsunade's occasional confession in the sand battlefield. Coupled with Tsunade's current performance, he could probably guess Tsunade's thoughts. After all, the people who were seriously injured were probably some of the higher-ups of Woodleaf. Because the people who weren't strong enough were either lightly injured or killed by their injuries. So, Tsunade didn't care about the people she saved were Watergate and Uzumaki Shina Kushina. In addition, Jiraiya, who was also a Sannin, begged her to come back to Woodleaf. And this time when he came back, it could be said that he had exhausted the last bit of relationship with Konoha. It would be difficult to see Tsunade again in the future. But although Nangongja thought so, there was still an unexpected situation. Because Nangongja recovered quickly, he was discharged from the hospital and returned to Woodleaf's rebuilt home. When Nine Tails attacked the village, the Hatake family's residence was almost destroyed. The remaining members of the Hatake family were all mediocre in strength. Without White Fang's protection, most of the Hatake family members didn't have the opportunity to rebuild their own courtyard. Except for Kakashi, because he was the son of White Fang, and his talent was extremely high, and he was also the disciple of Woodleaf's fourth Hokage. So, he was allocated resources to rebuild his former residence. Nangongja, because of his extraordinary performance in the Battle of Nine Tails, the place where he lived was also restored. In order to celebrate Nangongja's discharge from the hospital, and to welcome Mishiro and Linger to Woodleaf, they planned to go to a restaurant and have a good meal. The few of them sat down and ordered the dishes. While waiting for the dishes, they chatted. "Do you all know each other?" Nangongja said to his sister, Mishiro and Linger. "Yes, we do know each other, big brother." The two of them followed Tang Ren's team into Woodleaf village the day after Nine Tails attacked the village. "They asked around and found me." Nangongro nodded. At the same time, she also nodded to Mishiro. "It's all thanks to Sister Mishiro's help. Otherwise, I really wouldn't be able to take care of you, sister." Hearing how Nangongro addressed Mishiro, Nangongja was slightly surprised. Looking at the dazed Nangongja, Mishiro extended her small hand and knocked on Nangongja's head. "It's been so long and you still haven't asked me when I was born." "When I chatted with Sister Rower, I found out that she was actually younger than me, so we called each other sisters." Although Nangongja's body was very well trained, and Mishiro didn't use too much strength, a simple knock on the head didn't hurt at all, but Nangongja still pretended to be pitiful and looked at Mishiro with teary eyes. Seeing Nangongja's funny look, Nangongro, Mishiro and Linger all laughed. "Big brother is so funny. Little Linger, I don't cry so easily." Little Linger covered her mouth and laughed. She also mocked Nangongja. Hearing Linger's words, Nangongja stopped pretending to be wronged and slowly walked behind Little Linger. He reached out and carried Little Linger and put her on his lap. "Really? Little Linger is so amazing." Nangongja pretended to be surprised and looked at Little Linger. "Of course." Hearing Nangongja's question, Little Linger seemed to be proud for a moment. She pouted and raised her head slightly. Her big eyes blinked as she looked at Nangongja. This adorable look really hit Nangongja's cuteness in an instant. Nangongja reached out and patted Little Linger's head. "Our Little Linger is amazing." Seeing Nangongja and Little Linger's warm interaction, Nangongro and Mishiro also laughed. Seeing Mishiro and Nangongro's laughter, Little Linger looked at Nangongja in confusion. "Big brother, why are the two sisters laughing?" Nangongja also raised his head and saw the smiles on Nangongro and Mishiro's faces. "Because they think Little Linger is very cute." The few of them still wanted to say something, but the sound of something heavy falling to the ground came from the door of the private room. After Nangongja carefully identified it, he felt that it was the sound of someone falling down because they were too drunk to walk. "Fine. Let me go take a look and see who drank so much." Nangongja put Little Linger on the side and gestured to Nangongro and Mishiro. Then he stood up and opened the door of the izakaya. Nangongja was slightly surprised when he saw who it was. Because of the drunkenness in the aisle, it was his former battlefield commander, the Princess of Woodleaf, Tsunade Haim. Nangongja hurried over and helped Tsunade up from the ground. "Tsunade-sama, are you okay?" With that said, Nangongja also slightly mobilized the internal force in his body, trying to help Tsunade to clear her veins and restore her consciousness. But as if she sensed Nangongja's intention, Tsunade reached out and grabbed Nangongja's wrist. At the same time she shook her head. "Don't help me sober up. With my strength, unless I'm willing to get drunk, I won't be drunk. Today Jiraiya-sensei and I came here for a farewell meal. It's better to get drunk." Although Tsunade was drunk and couldn't even walk steadily, she spoke clearly. It was obvious that she deliberately drank so much to numb her body. "Tsunade-sama, are you really going to leave Woodleaf and not come back?" As soon as he said that, Nangongja secretly scolded himself for his stupidity. Because Tsunade's omens had already shown her disappointment in Konoha. Not coming back. Tsunade shook her heavy head and muttered, "Who knows what will happen in the future? I also thought that I wouldn't come back after leaving with Leaf last time. But Jiraiya told me that Shinakushina was seriously injured and dying. I couldn't help but come back to save her. I thought I could be ruthless and completely abandon with Leaf, but, after all, this is the village that my grandfathers built with their own hands. Maybe Tsunade really drank too much. Nangongja shouldn't know about Shinakushina and other things. But these small things didn't matter. Nangongja could feel Tsunade's tangled emotions at this moment. Tsunade-sama. Since you've decided, then do it. If you regret it, Wood Leaf will always be your home, right? I'll send you back first. If you don't go back after so long, Jiraiya-sama and the 3 generations may come out to find you." Tsunade nodded and agreed to Nangongja's proposal. Chapter 71. Under Tsunade's guidance, Nangongja found the box where Sandaime and Jiraiya were. After opening the door and explaining the situation, Nangongja left. After all, whether it's Jiraiya, Tsunade, or the 3 generations, they are all master and apprentice, and they are close to each other. There are some things that I know and I heard. It doesn't make any sense, so it's better to rot in my stomach. There will be people who will worry about it. As for me, although I'm a Woodleaf ninja, even if I become the best Jonin, I don't have any right to speak. This is the treatment that a ninja who was not trained by Woodleaf from childhood must receive. Nangongja returned to his box and noticed Mishiro and Nangong-ro's puzzled eyes. Just now, Tsunade-sama drank too much. I have sent Tsunade-sama to Sandaime and Jiraiya-sama's side. It's okay. Nangongja said, and at the same time he waved his hand, indicating that there is no need to talk about this topic. Nangong-ro and Mishiro also knew that since there are some things that they don't understand, it's better not to ask. Speaking of which, Ro, have you been taking care of Yandaime's wife and child during this time? Nangongja suddenly remembered Nangong-ro's work that she occasionally mentioned to him before. After all, Yandaime gave him a good impression, so Nangongja still paid some attention to him. Yes, after Tsunade-sama came back, she began to treat Shinakushina-sama, who was seriously injured when Nine-Tails attacked the village. And Shinakushina-sama seemed to have premature birth because of Nine-Tails' attack. The child and she are very weak, so Kiba Hospital sent several medical ninjas to accompany them, and I was one of the shifts. Nangong-ro said, seeming to remember the situation of Shinakushina and the child. Her face was also slightly strange, maybe she was worried about the two's health. But it's strange, I don't know what Yandaime-sama and Shinakushina-sama think. They want the child to follow the mother's instinct, Uzumaki. Maybe Shinakushina-sama wanted to end the Uzumaki clan's decline? Nangong-ro also immediately said something that felt strange. After all, in the ninja world, most children follow their father's surname instead of their mother's surname. However, this is family's business. Everyone couldn't say anything. It was fine if they talked about it in private, but if they really wanted to make it public, it would be a little too nosy. Follow the mothers? Then, what's the child? He wasn't interested, he didn't was S's, but when he heard that Yandaime-sama's child followed the mother's surname, he became interested. Oh. Nangong-ro thought for a while. It seems that because the name was a bit strange she was a bit speechless for a while. But soon she patted her head and said the child's name, Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. This is the name of Yandaime-sama's child. Naruto. What a good name. It was fine if he did not make a sound, but once he did, he would amaze the world. Presumably, Yandaime-sama is full of expectations for his child, right? Just when Nangongja was sighing that Yandaime-sama gave his child a good name, the door of Nangongja's room was violently pushed open. Ah. Boy, you really have a good eye, it took me a long time to come up with this name. A white-haired uncle stood at the door and laughed. It's amazing. Well, yes, that's what I thought at the beginning. Nangongja naturally knew the person who came, whether it was the Rock Ninja battlefield or the Izakaya box. Nangongja had seen this person before. It was one of the Sannin Jiraiya. Really? This name was actually given by Jiraiya-sama? Nangongja suddenly understood why Jiraiya heard him praising Naruto's name and couldn't help but push the door open and laugh. Speaking of which, this is the name of the protagonist of my first novel? Jiraiya touched his chin with his hand and said with a proud face. Jiraiya-sama, do you still write novels? I haven't heard about it yet. Jiraiya-sama, can you tell me the name of the novel? I'll read it when I have time. Nangongja has always been like this, although he's very fierce in battle. But usually he's very gentle and humble. Moreover, as one of the Sannin, Jiraiya-sama can write novels, it's interesting enough. Ah. You're very good kid. Of course I'll let you read the treasure that I wrote. Saying that, Jiraiya began to fumble in the ninja bag on his back. I can also give you an autograph. This is Jiraiya-sama's autograph. Thank me. After finding the book, Jiraiya opened the title page of the book. There was a calligraphy pen with Jiraiya's name on it. When Kakashi read my novel, he couldn't help himself. These days he's been pestering me to write the next novel. He wants to read it as soon as possible. Jiraiya stretched out his hand and scratched his messy hair with a worried look, but what's with the proud look in his eyes? However, it was a book that could make Kakashi, who had an ice cube face, addicted. It's really something to look forward to. After taking the book from Jiraiya's hand, Nangongja was a little confused for a moment. The book had a dark red cover and the words Intimate Paradise written on it. More importantly, there were several scantily clad women on the cover who were flirting with each other. Wasn't this clearly a small book? But Nangongja still endured the strange feeling in his heart, took the book from Jiraiya, and put it in the small ninja bag on his back. Thank you, Jiraiya-sama. Just now, Tsunade-sama seemed to have drunk a lot of wine. Please pay more attention to Tsunade-sama and take care of Tsunade-sama. Nangongja's words were in line with etiquette. His words already had the intention of asking the guest to leave. After all, Nangongja can say that he's holding a family banquet. Jiraiya's status is very high, and they're not very close to each other, so Nangongja was a little reluctant to let Jiraiya join in. It's okay. I'll personally send Tsunade home, but you... Speaking of this, Jiraiya suddenly looked at Nangongro and Mishiro sitting behind him, and the wretched look in his eyes was about to explode. He stepped forward and patted Nangongja's shoulder. Young people still need to control themselves. His tone was earnest, just like an elder's. However, Nangongja felt that the words that came out of his mouth were awkward no matter how he listened. Control? Is this something an elder should say? Chapter 72. After Jiraiya said that, Nangongja could only helplessly look at the two girls sitting behind him. Unlike little Linger, who didn't understand. Nangongro was blushing at the moment, but Mishiro didn't know why he was so interested. Hey. Is this still the Mishiro I know? You know, people always have a side that they don't know. Nangongja remembered Jiraiya's heroic figure on the rocks battlefield, and the way he used all kinds of ninjutsu. For a while, he felt that Jiraiya's image in his mind collapsed. Among the Sannin, Orochimaru had already betrayed the village, and Tsunade was also very disappointed with Woodleaf and drank heavily. Jiraiya, the only one who still retained a great and righteous image in Nangongja's mind, was actually an old pervert who loved to write small books? Also, if he didn't hear wrong, Jiraiya seemed to have given such a book to Kakashi? So, in fact, Kakashi was also a person who was cold on the outside but passionate on the inside. Nangongja suddenly remembered that when he was in the hospital, Kakashi also came to visit Yondaime-sama and his wife. On the bench in the corridor, he was holding a book with a serious face. He even laughed from time to time. This book can't be that book, right? Sure enough, ninjas are people who can't be judged by conventional means. Even if Kakashi was an iceberg youth, was he actually a stuffy young man in his heart? I didn't expect that Woodleaf is so famous. One of the candidates for the 4th Hokage, Jiraiya-sama, is actually, how should I put it, so bold and unrestrained? Mishiro sighed for a while. When Woodleaf was running for the 4th Hokage, Jiraiya, one of the Sannin, was actually very popular. Even the members of the Fire Country's royal family supported Jiraiya. But Jiraiya took the initiative to give up. Otherwise, why would the position of 4th Hokage be given to someone like Watergate? Even with the support of the 3 generations and Watergate's contribution was great. If Jiraiya wanted to, he could immediately become Woodleaf's Hokage. Okay. We'll just treat these people as a joke. I didn't expect that Woodleaf's Sannin to be so promiscuous. Tsunade was a gambler. Orochimaru. Jiraiya. As expected, the disciples taught by the 3rd generation master were all unique. A burst of uncontrollable laughter rang out. It was actually Nangongro who was blushing just now. Promiscuous? How did you come up with such a strange nickname? If he heard it, he... So, where was her? Why did she start laughing all of a sudden? Looking at his sister's appearance, Nangongja became even stupider than Gun. However, what followed was the laughter of the 3 women. Although the process was a bit different from what Nangongja imagined, the 4 of them could eat together and laugh. Isn't that great? Looking at Nangongja, who was talking to Mishiro, and little Linger, who was stuffing all kinds of food into her mouth. For a moment, Nangongja felt that time was so wonderful. Just like that, they had a long meal in the izakaya. Time always flies and it's hard to stop it. Nangongja cultivated in woodleaf for 3 months. After the battle with 9 tails, Nangongja couldn't fully explore the condition of his body because of excessive internal energy consumption. After that, because he had to slowly recuperate his body quickly recovered. Nangongja finally recovered. As Nangongja felt the vigorous inner strength that was surging like a river in his body, he felt unprecedentedly relaxed. It seemed that some strange shackles were removed from his body. Originally, Nangongja had a lot of conjectures in his heart. At this moment, the internal energy in his body had faithfully told Nangongja the answer. Internal energy and sword energy had the same root. They were bred by the same method, but they showed different interests. All things return to yin and embrace yang. Tao begets 1, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, and 3 begets all things. The human body was like the most original one. The 2 natures of yin and yang were hidden in the human body, and the 2 natures of yin and yang nurtured the 3 basic forces of the human body. How similar was the relationship between yin and yang, internal energy, and sword energy? Perhaps, the road paved by the earliest people who cultivated internal energy was to harmonize internal energy and sword energy. There was gentleness and there was violence. The 2 harmonized with each other and one was indispensable. Only then could the true power of internal energy be unleashed. However, under the washing of the river of time, many methods of harmonizing internal energy and sword energy had been exhausted. After Nangongja woke up, Nangong-ro explained to Nangongja that she had used a crystal left by her grandfather to save the violent internal energy in her body. Perhaps it was a method of harmonizing sword energy and internal energy in ancient times? Nangongja shook his head to clear these messy thoughts out of his mind. He changed into a black short swordsman's uniform and held a black sword in his hand. He walked to the center of the courtyard. It was already the middle of winter. Woodleaf had also snowed a few times. Nangongja's courtyard was also filled with sparkling white snowflakes. Just like that, Nangongja walked barefooted to the center of the snow. He did not use the internal energy flowing in his body. Instead, he slowly began to dance with the black sword in his hand. His swordsmanship was light and gentle. It was as if a young girl was reaching out her soft hands and gently caressing her lover. The young girl seemed to be opening her mouth to speak, but she swallowed her words. The soft silk slowly narrated on the tip of the sword. What about Nangongja? At this moment he was thinking about Mishiro's gentleness and care for him. The more he thought about it, the gentler his swordsmanship became. Little Linger wrapped herself in a cotton-padded coat and opened the door of her room. She wanted to ventilate the room. After all, the charcoal stove in the room was warm. However, there was a strange smell. Coincidentally, she saw Nangongja practicing swordsmanship in the courtyard. Little Linger did not understand how profound Nangongja's swordsmanship was. However, the light and graceful swordsmanship was like a dance. Little Linger was mesmerized. Brother's swordsmanship is so beautiful. The little stars in her eyes were about to pop out. Nangong-ro and Mishiro heard Little Linger's exclamation and came to Little Linger's door. Mishiro did not understand. Little Linger did not understand. However, how could Nangong-ro not understand? That soft affection was slowly expressed along with the swordsmanship. So, brother's feelings for someone are so deep that it affects his swordsmanship? Nangong-ro sighed. Her eyes could not help but look at Mishiro who was beside her. Chapter 73. Mishiro didn't notice Nangong-ro's gaze. After all, Mishiro was just an ordinary person who didn't know ninjutsu. Moreover, he was focused on Nangongja's sword dance. However, with the gentle narration of love, Nangongja's swordsmanship slowly changed. It was no longer the entanglement between lovers. Instead, it was a ball of fire that warmed and illuminated the world. Unknowingly, internal energy was slowly injected into the sword. Although the amount of inner force wasn't large, it was able to display extraordinary power. The cracks on the black sword's body slowly emitted a faint red glow. That's right. The black sword existed for the sake of true inner strength. Only with true internal energy could the black sword be used to its full potential. There was a huge difference between internal energy and chakra. Especially in combat, chakra ninjutsu had the 5 attributes of water, fire, wind, earth, and lightning. A qualified ninja could use ninjutsu of at least 1 attribute. A jonin could use ninjutsu of more attributes. The most famous would leaf ninjutsu professor, Ninja Ao, 3 generations of Hokage. Yuan Fei Sasuke could even use 5 types of ninjutsu and master their nature and form changes. What about internal energy? In a one-on-one fight, internal energy could cut and block the transmission and application of chakra. However, in a large-scale battle between armies, a person who cultivated internal energy was far less useful than a ninja who was proficient in chakra. Therefore, the black sword was a great breakthrough. It was a tool that allowed internal energy cultivators to have the ability to fight in a large-scale battle. It wasn't sharp and it wasn't something that was unusually strong. It didn't even have the magical effect of sucking blood. The black sword was a key that could help the user communicate with the power of heaven and earth. Through the user's internal energy, it could guide the power of heaven and earth that lingered around the world. Of course, Nangongja didn't know that much. He just subconsciously transmitted his internal energy into the black sword. The warm winter sun peeked out from the thick clouds, revealing its face. A ray of sunlight shone on Nangongja's body, seemingly intentional but also seemingly unintentional. The light within the slits of the black sword shone even brighter. The swordsmanship no longer had the gentle feeling it had at the beginning. Instead, it was a ball of fire, a great sun. It emitted its own light without restraint, as if it wanted to dispel all the haze in this world. A clear voice suddenly sounded. If one had to describe it, it was like the sound of water droplets. And that was indeed the case. With Nangongja's feet as the center, the thick snow began to melt slowly. At first, it only melted a little. However, the sun didn't seem to be satisfied that it could only cause such a small effect. It became even more dazzling. The ice and snow in the courtyard began to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. The melted ice and snow gradually converged into a stream. The sun was so bright, but it didn't evaporate the water with the heat. Just let it flow. The snow water seeped into the soil. With an almost imperceptible sound, a small blade of grass sprouted from the soil. It seemed to be a little confused and sleepy. It hadn't endured the cold winter yet, but it grew out just like that. However, the sun's light still shone on it. It dispelled the remaining trace of wilt. It made its emerald green even brighter. As if they had received the encouragement of this small grass, the other small grasses also began to emerge from the soil. Soon, the entire courtyard was covered with green blades of grass. What about the cherry blossom tree that had withered in autumn, and half of it had been burned in the battle with the nine-tailed beast? It began to grow buds one after another. The buds grew spontaneously. They turned into branches. One by one, the buds formed and bloomed. For a moment, the courtyard was full of spring. As for Little Linger, Mishiro, and Nangongro, they had long been mesmerized and stunned by the scene. Although Nangongja had always been a rare powerhouse in their hearts, they had never seen him before. But this kind of violation of the laws of nature allowed the grass and withered trees to sprout and bloom in such a short time? It was simply beyond people's imagination. And Nangongja seemed to be exhausted. He slowly put the long sword in his hand back into the scabbard on his back. He opened his eyes and looked at the green around him. He smiled happily. With a light leap, he broke off a branch full of cherry blossoms. He walked in front of Little Linger. Didn't Little Linger complain to brother that winter has been long? Then, the brother will turn the entire courtyard into spring. There will be flowers and green grass. Nangongja said and smiled. He handed the branch in his hand to Little Linger. And Little Linger? She just took it in a daze. It seemed that the little girl still hadn't recovered from the shock. Brother, just now Nangongro couldn't help but speak. Using a human body to go against the heavens and change the environment of a small area. Was this really something that a human could do? Don't be so surprised. This isn't my power, it's the power of the entire world. Nangongja shook his head. After all, he wasn't one of those legendary gods. I used my internal energy to attract the power of the world. Let a part of the power of nature become my own power. It's actually not difficult to change the environment. Nangongja seemed to want to say something, but he suddenly turned his head and looked behind him. One of his hands grabbed the hilt of the black sword on his back. Soon, at the end of the horizon, a small dot rushed in Nangongja's direction at an extremely fast speed. At first, it was difficult to see the appearance of the person. But soon Nangongja let go of the hilt in his hand. It was very simple. Because in Nangongja's eyes was a huge toad. Only the Sannin of Jiraiya's family had such a summoned beast. The Yondaime was still recuperating in Kiba Hospital. So, who else could it be but Jiraiya? Boom. The toad landed, and a figure with long white hair also landed in front of Nangongja. Who used senjutsu? Jiraiya asked anxiously. In fact, Jiraiya hadn't been in contact with Senjutsu for a long time. He was still in the cultivation stage. But he could still use his perception. The woodleaf incident was over because the yondaime didn't reply. So, Jiraiya didn't leave the woodleaf immediately. Instead, he listened to his teacher's advice and temporarily stayed in the woodleaf. Suddenly, he felt the fluctuation of Senjutsu that he thought was a secret technique of Mount Mayaboku, so he naturally came to take a look. Jiraiya-sama? Nangongja was actually a little confused, because he didn't know what Senjutsu Jiraiya was talking about. Senjutsu is? It's the power that turned this place into spring. Jiraiya said hurriedly. If I'm not wrong, the Senjutsu you mentioned should be the power that I recently learned to attract nature, right? Chapter 74. Is it really the power of nature? Such a magical effect. In Jiraiya's impression, only the first Hokages would release, and the two toads of Mount Mayaboku have this kind of effect. Wait for me a moment. Seeing Nangongja's doubts, Jiraiya could only stretch out his hands. He wanted Nangongja to wait for a moment. Then Jiraiya turned around and said to the giant toad standing behind him, "Don't worry. Toad-isamu, you go back to Mount Mayaboku first. Inform Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin. I found a ninja in Woodleaf Village who uses the power of nature. I hope to bring him to Mount Mayaboku to figure out what's going on." At this time, Jiraiya didn't have the wretched appearance he showed in front of Nangongja. On the contrary, he was too overbearing. He didn't even consult Nangongja's opinion and began to make all kinds of arrangements. Jiraiya-sama. Nangongja patted Jiraiya's shoulder, hoping that Jiraiya would look at him. What? Jiraiya turned his head. He was halfway through his words. He already saw Nangongja's slightly cold eyes. Even if Nangongja's position in Woodleaf wasn't as high as him, he wasn't one of the leaders of Woodleaf. But it's still undeniable that Nangongja's power can be ranked in Woodleaf. What's more, Woodleaf experienced the Third Shinobi World War, and Nine Tails attacked the village. All kinds of talents were somewhat withered. The Sannin who could have become the new pillar of Woodleaf betrayed and left. As for Jiraiya, he was busy investigating a mysterious organization hidden in the dark. To put it bluntly, Nangongja was already one of the important forces guarding Woodleaf. For such a person, Jiraiya's attitude was a bit too much. Sorry, I lost my composure. Jiraiya, who understood the ins and outs, didn't put on any airs in front of Nangongja. Instead, he openly apologized. It's mainly because nature's chakra is too important for us ninjas. Everyone knows that the first Hokage of Woodleaf Village, the Shinobi no Kami Senju Takuma. The reason why he was able to conquer the world and subdue the nine-tailed beast was because of his legendary Mokuta ninjutsu. But today there is no one who can use the wood escape technique. The first Hokage can be said to be the only ninja in the known history who can use Mokutan. Even Senju Takuma, the younger brother of the first Hokage, can't use this magical technique. We've never been able to explain what's going on, but my sensei, the third Hokage of Konoha, is the direct disciple of the first and second Hokage, and there are various signs of him using wood release against the first Hokage. The most important element to use Mokutan is nature's chakra. Nangongja was a little confused when he heard this. About the power of the first Hokage, as long as one lives in the shinobi world, almost everyone has heard about it. But according to Jiraiya, controlling nature's chakra can use Mokutan. This is obviously not the case because at this moment, Nangongja can control and draw on some nature's chakra. But he can only draw on the grass that already exists, and the dead tree that still has a trace of vitality. Compared with the first Hokage's method of creating a forest out of thin air, and every branch can absorb and suppress chakra's chakra, it's really a far cry, isn't it? Jiraiya-sama. I can use nature's chakra only because I draw on a small amount of nature's chakra with my own strength. There is no such thing as the miracle of Mokutan. I don't practice chakra like most ninjas, so did you misunderstand something? Although Jiraiya is still a little impatient, after understanding how important Nangongja is, he still listened to Nangongja's doubts. Indeed, it's not that you can use nature's chakra to use Mokutan, because the first Hokage has completely retained nature's chakra in his body, absorbing and assimilating nature's chakra. There is no barrier between nature's chakra and nature's chakra. The summoned beasts of the Sannin are all from ancient races. It was Master who specially searched for us. It was because of the desire to reproduce Mokutan that we signed a summon contract with these 3 summoned beast clans. However, after Orochimaru's test, we found that it's impossible to integrate nature's chakra with nature's chakra like the first Hokage. Any attempt to completely integrate oneself into nature's chakra will only result in failure. You'll only turn yourself into a frog, a python, or even a slug. Nangongja didn't ask why Jiraiya knows that failure will lead to such a tragic end. Because as long as it involves the first Hokage's Mokutan, Woodleaf's plan, and Orochimaru, it won't be anything positive, will it? So, you're looking for a new way to integrate nature's chakra into your body? Nangongja finally understood the plan of Jiraiya or Woodleaf Hokage. Nangongja, do you know how important Mokutan is to Woodleaf? Woodleaf now has a senju with half or even 1/3 of the power of the first Hokage. Woodleaf will not be just one of the 5 great shinobi villages in the world, Jiraiya said, and a fire seemed to burn in his eyes. A pair of big hands grabbed Nangongja's shoulders. The huge force almost made Nangongja grimace. This is the seemingly amiable and sometimes even perverted Jiraiya? At this moment, in Nangongja's eyes, Jiraiya was more like a person who was blinded by religious fanaticism. Is this the reason why you want to take me to the place called Mount Myaboku? Nangongja didn't show any emotion, but Nangong-ro, Mishiro, and Little Linger were standing in the room looking at Nangongja with a worried face. Such a scene was too stressful for the girls. That's one of the Sannin Jiraiya. His every move can almost represent the attitude of the entire Woodleaf. And Nangongja? For those who are interested in Mokutan, he's just a precious living material. Even if Nangongja is really exhausted? Anyway, he's not a ninja trained by Woodleaf, so there's no need to worry. Although Woodleaf is now green and yellow. But what if they can find the secret of Mokutan from Nangongja? Make Mokutan a regular jutsu of Woodleaf? That's really exciting. Chapter 75. Just when Nangongja wanted to say something to Jiraiya, Jiraiya suddenly turned around and quickly made hand seals, summoning Gamadame who had just disappeared. Jiraiya-sama, Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin have agreed to your request. Although this Nangong Jonin didn't sign a contract with Mount Myaboku, because it involves senjutsu, the 2 Sannin have made special permission to reverse summon Nangongja Jonin to Mount Myaboku. Gamadame seemed to be a straightforward person, and he didn't say much and immediately reported the decision of the 2 Sannin to Jiraiya. When Jiraiya heard the news, he nodded and looked at Nangongja. I'm sorry, Nangong-jun. Because senjutsu and natural energy have a wide range of effects. I have to take you to Mount Myaboku and investigate what's going on. Jiraiya seemed to be a little apologetic and said, but, please rest assured that it will never endanger your life and the normal lives of your family and friends. I promise you with my title as a Sannin. At this time, Jiraiya seemed to have calmed down, and he didn't look like a fanatic anymore. Nangongja wanted to believe Jiraiya's words. After all, Jiraiya has already promised Nangongja with his title. But Nangongja couldn't help but speculate in his heart. Is this a disguised threat? If I refuse, does it mean that whether it's Nangong-ro, Mishiro, or Little Linger, they will tremble under the threat of Woodleaf? Don't say that Nangongja's thoughts are too extreme. As long as people who have really seen the various dark sides of the major ninja villages, they will have such thoughts. White Fang's example was right in front of his eyes. In that case, I'll leave it to Jiraiya-sama. Nangongja could only nod, indicating that he agreed with Jiraiya's proposal. That's good, I'll start preparing the reverse summoning technique now. Hearing Nangongja's agreement, Jiraiya immediately looked happy. Immediately he put the huge scroll on his back on the ground and unfolded it. His fingertips fluttered and he quickly printed hand seals. Ninjutsu, reverse summoning technique. He pressed his bloody hand to the ground, and a spell spread on the ground. When the spell ended, a burst of brilliance also rose from the spell. So, Jiraiya didn't say anything and pointed. He pointed to the formation array to do so. His meaning to wanted to step. Just to step into the array. And little s to s is to to's to him to and linger, and stood. As to say to say something. As to. But Nangongja immediately shook his head and stopped Nangong-ro from saying what she wanted to say. There were some things that once said there was no room for negotiation. Don't worry, Jiraiya-sama is one of Woodleaf's Sannin. Such a person can be trusted if he swears by his own name. I'll be there soon, take care of Mishiro and Little Linger. Although Nangongja said so, his eyes flickered on his face that Jiraiya couldn't see. Nangong-ro and Nangongja have been together for a long time. Nangongja's little tricks were naturally familiar to her. However, it was precisely because of this that she couldn't do anything unusual. She just nodded and then said, "I understand, Oni-san, you can rest assured and follow Jiraiya-sama. I'll take good care of Mishiro-san and Linger," Nangong-ro said firmly and seriously. Nangongja didn't say anything more because he believed in her. His younger sister had already understood what he meant. Then he turned and walked into the array. And Jiraiya? After taking a deep look at Nangong-ro, he also followed Nangongja's footsteps into the array. However, a faint sigh still reverberated in the air. I didn't expect that even Nangongja's sister is also a strange woman. Seeing Nangongja and Jiraiya's figures disappear, Nangong-ro also turned around and returned to her room with Mishiro and little Linger. She closed the door. In the forest outside Nangong's house, several figures suddenly flashed by, making people feel dazzled. After closing the door, Nangong-ro said to Mishiro and little Linger, "Mishiro-san and little Linger, you all go to your rooms and pack your luggage. If there's nothing wrong it's okay, but if there's something wrong, we'll leave with leaf immediately." Then she walked into Nangongja's room and opened a secret door in the closet. "This time I'm sure that something unusual will happen." And Mishiro? She just took little Linger's hand and walked to their rooms to pack their luggage. The tree wants to be quiet, but the wind doesn't stop. I didn't expect that even in the most peaceful wood leaf, Mia still has to be on edge. Mishiro thought silently. At the same time, Nangongja and Jiraiya arrived at the legendary Mount Mayaboku. Here. Is this the legendary Mount Mayaboku that was passed down from the Sage of the Six Paths? At this moment, Nangongja didn't have the gloomy feeling he had when he left Woodleaf. After all, things have already reached this point. Even if he had other plans, it doesn't make any sense. Mount Mayaboku can be said to be the most secure prison. It's a small world independent of the shinobi world. Even if Nangongja wanted to escape, how can he escape? So, since he's here, he might as well take it easy. He might as well take a good look at the lake and mountains and listen to the chirping of birds and cicadas. Indeed, Mount Mayaboku is indeed a paradise far away from the chaos of the shinobi world. However, once something happens in the shinobi world, Mount Mayaboku will still be unable to protect itself. This space is attached to the main space of the shinobi world. If the skin doesn't exist, what's the hair? Jiraiya is actually a person who wants to avoid the world, but the sense of responsibility and justice in his heart doesn't allow him to get away from it. Maybe he's just born to be busy, right? One day, maybe he will be burdened by the sense of responsibility and justice in his heart and die here. So, are we going to meet the Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin you just mentioned? Nangongja suddenly remembered the conversation between Jiraiya and Toad Isamu just now. Obviously, this so-called Shima Sennin and Fukasaku Sennin are the current leaders of Mount Mayaboku. No, young man. We're already here. An old voice sounded behind Nangongja. Nangongja hurriedly turned around and bowed deeply. Greetings to the two Sennin. Looking at Nangongja's respectful appearance, Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin seemed to be very happy. I haven't seen such a polite boy for a long time. Little Jiraiya, can't you learn from this young man? Chapter 76. Hearing Fukasaku Sennin's words, Jiraiya was a little embarrassed for a while. After all, Jiraiya had heard this kind of conversation from Fukasaku Sennin too many times. Fukasaku Sennin, this kid is my junior. Can't you give me some face? Although Jiraiya knew that he couldn't stop Fukasaku Sennin from mocking him, he couldn't help but say this. What about Fukasaku Sennin? He didn't pay attention to Jiraiya's words at all. Instead, he continued to talk to Nangongja. Boy, don't be so formal. Just think of me as a slightly older elder to you. Fukasaku Sennin's behavior made Nangongja feel that this Sennin didn't seem to be the kind of person he imagined. Instead, he was very kind. So Nangongja also raised his bowing posture. Okay, then I'll boldly call you Fukasaku Sennin. Fukasaku Sennin seemed to be happy that someone called him that, so he laughed. Haha boy. You are really different from Jiraiya. I like it very much. Nangongja looked up, trying to find Fukasaku Sennin's figure. Whether it was Toad Isamu or Toad Buntai. It seems that the higher the seniority, the bigger the size. This is also one of the major characteristics of the psychic beast group. But to Nangongja's surprise, Fukasaku Sennin's figure, how to describe it? It's a little too small, like the size of an ordinary toad. It's just that his chin has a white goatee and he's wearing a somewhat shabby cloth robe. He looks a little ordinary. What's wrong, boy? Are you curious why I'm so small? Fukasaku Senin seemed to see Nangongja's thoughts and began to ask Nangongja. But he didn't wait for Nangongja's answer and said it himself. Indeed, according to common sense, psychic beasts are generally stronger the bigger the size. Regardless of whether it was the tailed beasts or the many famous spiritual beasts, they were all very large. However, my wife and I are one of the few people in Mount Mystic Wood who have succeeded in cultivating natural energy, and we have begun to slowly restrain ourselves. If I were to reveal my true form, I would be 2 or 3 times bigger than that brat Wentai, right? So that's how it was? Nangongja suddenly thought of the black lion, Liang, that was hiding in his body. Back then, Liang was also able to restrain himself. After all, if it was too big, it would be troublesome in terms of combat and other aspects. All right, old man. Stop showing off in front of the boy. And why did you say that about Jiraiya Kid? Obviously, Jiraiya Kid is also very polite, right? A voice different from Fukasaku Senin's came from behind Nangongja. Nangongja looked back. A toad dressed as a lady was standing on Jiraiya's shoulder at the moment. She must be the other Senin, Shima Senin, right? Greetings, Shima Senin. Nangongja still respectfully saluted Shima Senin. Ioyon, just like what the old man said, you are a polite child. Seeing that one person and 2 toads were about to start a long conversation, Jiraiya interrupted their mutual praise. As for whether it was to prevent the 2 Senin from criticizing him for being rude, Jiraiya would never admit it. 2 Senin, let's solve the main purpose of my coming here. Hearing what Jiraiya said, the 2 Senin seemed to remember that Nangongja could use natural energy. Okay, let's get down to business. Fukasaku Senin straightened his robe and coughed softly. It seemed that he was ready to get down to business. It's like this, Nangong Kid. About your natural energy, Jiraiya has already told us about it through Brave Toad. Fukasaku Senin glanced at Jiraiya, and Jiraiya nodded at the same time, indicating Fukasaku Senin to continue. Jiraiya Kid's character, we 2 old men and old women are very clear about it. When it comes to the topic of natural energy, he will definitely be rude at the time. I hope you don't mind. Hearing this, Jiraiya couldn't help but smile awkwardly. After all, he did go a bit too far at the time. At this moment, Fukasaku Senin actually apologized for him, which was really embarrassing. And Nangongja heard Fukasaku Senin's words, and the stone in his heart also dissipated a little. It's okay. I also know what natural energy means to Woodleaf and the 3 summoned beast Holy Lance. Although Jiraiya-sama did lose control of his emotions at that time, he didn't do anything strange. Hearing Nangongja's words, Fukasaku Senin also nodded. Well, very good. Then let's continue the topic of natural energy. The way we use natural energy inherited by Mount Myaboku is to absorb small natural energy particles from the air and other places, mix it with chakra in your body, and generate a higher energy form called Senjutsu chakra. Although it's also an application of natural energy, it's a trick. But it's a shortcut. After all, it doesn't use natural energy in the true sense. Because it's impossible for ordinary people to circulate natural energy smoothly in their body. Once they lose control, it will cause natural energy to go berserk and petrify themselves. Fukasaku Senin stretched out his hand and pointed to the huge stone frogs around him. These huge stone frogs are actually humans or are people who failed to cultivate natural energy. If a toad fails to cultivate senjutsu, it will be petrified. Once a human fails to cultivate, it will lose its human form and petrify. Looking at the countless stone frogs around him, Nangongja felt a chill in his heart for a while. The natural energy that he can attract is actually such a dangerous thing? But you're different, you're using natural energy. Even without chakra's natural energy, your form didn't change and the power in your body didn't go berserk. It's really amazing. This is also the reason why Jiraiya brought you to Mount Myaboku even if he lost his composure. But, Fukasaku Senin said, but suddenly shook his head and even sighed, I don't understand how you did it. Before I came here to see you, Toad Senin had already given an order. I hope I can take you to see him. When Nangongja heard Fukasaku Senin's words, his mind turned. In fact, his understanding of natural energy is not that deep. He thought that the person called Toad Senin should give him a convincing explanation, right? Chapter 77. Toad Sage is a great existence that has existed since the era of Six Paths Senin. He is the guardian of Mount Myaboku. Generally, Great Sage doesn't intervene in the secular affairs of Mount Myaboku. This time, the great immortal Toad specially ordered us to bring you to see him. Fukasaku Senin said and took Nangongja to the depths of Mount Mayaboku. Liang, did this toad sage really exist since the era of Six Paths Senin? Nangongja silently said to Liang, who was hiding in his body. Toad? Six Paths Senin? It seems to be the old toad. He didn't know if Liang realized that he was cursing himself, but it was obvious that Liang actually knew this so-called toad sage. If I didn't guess wrong, this guy who calls himself Toad Sage. Isn't he Toadmaru? Liang muttered to himself, but Nangongja also heard it clearly. Is Liang also such an existence that has witnessed countless history and thousands of heroes? Can this Toad Sage really explain to me that I can use the power of nature? In fact, Nangongja has been secretly communicating with Liang since he entered Mount Mayaboku. Originally, he thought that using the power of nature is a matter of course. At most, it's a different form of power from ninjutsu. But since Jiraiya began to eagerly force Nangongja, Nangongja knew that the power of nature is very important. Although Liang has some understanding of the power of nature, he can't explain why Nangongja can use a sword to communicate with heaven and earth and use the power of nature. This is one of the reasons why Nangongja was willing to follow Jiraiya to Mount Mayaboku. Even if a person can use the power of nature. But even if he knows how, he doesn't know why. It's better not to have such power that he can't control. This is Nangongja's request for himself. Todamaru seems to have learned a dream entry technique from the Six Paths. Through entering dreams, one could observe the three realms and even foresee the future. He did have some skills. If there was really someone in this world who could answer your questions, then Toadball was indeed the best candidate. Of course. The premise is that this old man won't deliberately scheme against you. As Liang spoke, she was also worried. It was obvious that this Toadmaru, who was known as the Great Toad Immortal, his image in Liang wasn't that good. Even an old man would become a spirit, let alone an ancient spiritual beast that had been through many trials and tribulations. Even between Nangongja and Liang, if it weren't for the fact that their lives were linked, Liang wouldn't have been able to get along with him. Nangongja would not treat Liang with such sincerity. After all, he had to survive in such a dangerous world. It was better to be as careful as possible, right? The conversation between Nangongja and Liang continued, and Nangongja himself seemed to have reached the deepest part of Mount Mayaboku. A huge altar was built in a deep and serene cave. A huge toad was sitting in the middle of the altar, half asleep and half awake. Great Immortal. Great Immortal. That young man called Nangongja, we have brought him here. Fukasaku jumped a few times and arrived beside Great Immortal Toad's ear. He shouted strenuously. Great Immortal Toad seemed to have woken up because of Fukasaku's shout. Ugh! A faint groan could be heard and Immortal Toad's eyes opened a slit. Its dim yellow eyes seemed to have a bit of confusion from just waking up, as well as a kind of turbidity due to old age. Nangong? The Great Immortal Toad muttered softly. After a while it seemed to remember the name Nangong. Is it the person who cultivated internal energy and can use natural energy? It's been a long time. I haven't seen such a person. As Great Immortal Toad said this, his eyes began to look at Nangongja's figure, and he became silent. After a long silence, Nangongja felt that he couldn't leave in silence. Thus he slightly bowed and said, Woodleaf Jonin Nangongja. Greetings, Great Immortal Toad. Hearing Nangongja's words, Great Immortal Toad wanted to say something. However, he suddenly swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. You seem to have an old friend in your left arm? Sure enough, Great Immortal Toad's eyesight was extremely shocking. However, in such a short period of time, he discovered that there was another soul residing in Nangongja's left arm. Boy, let me out. Since an old friend invited me, I naturally have to show my face. Hearing Liang's words, Nangongja bit his right thumb, lifted the clothes on his left arm, and pressed his bloody finger on the lion head seal. Show yourself. Liang. An array formed above Nangongja, and Liang's huge head poked out of the array. Accompanied by lightning and thunder, Liang's body began to appear little by little. Finally, after a while, Liang's huge body appeared in the depths of Mount Mayaboku. Old Toad, it's been a long time. Liang's majestic and domineering voice instantly resounded throughout the cave. Is this Nangongja's summoned beast? Jiraiya looked at Liang's huge body, and an old memory surfaced in his mind. It was this summoned beast named Liang that followed Nangongja's rock shinobi to the battlefield. It contributed a lot to Woodleaf's victory. Although Jiraiya knew that this summoned beast was not ordinary, he really didn't expect that this black lion was actually from the same generation as Great Immortal Toad. It's you? The Great Immortal Toad seemed to have seen Liang's figure. In an instant, his slightly opened eyes suddenly widened. The dim, sleepy and dirty eyes all disappeared for a while. "You madman are still alive?" Li Yang heard Great Immortal Toad call him a madman, and for a while he seemed to have heard a joke. He laughed, and at the same time lightning surged. Li Yang's figure shrank little by little. This figure was the one Nangongja saw in his mind. A man wearing a black cloak. "Everyone says that I'm a madman, but in such a world. If I'm not a madman, how can I be free?" Li Yang said with a smile. But whether it was Great Immortal Toad, Shima Fukasaku, or even Jiraiya, they were all shocked by such a mighty man. What kind of courage did he have to say such words? Chapter 78. Fine. I already know what kind of character you have. Saying such words, this is the proud black lion I know. Although Toad Sage was shocked by Li Yang's words for a while, he quickly returned to normal. "So, whether it's the insidious and cunning old snake or the gentle slug, your words are still the most pleasing to the ear. It's been a long time, old Toad." Li Yang maintained her human form and stood beside Immortal Toad. But this scene is very strange. After all, although Li Yang's human form is very tall and burly, standing in front of Toad Sage, he's not even as big as Toad Sage's claw. It's really funny, isn't it? Toad Sage also looked at Nangongja at this moment. "I have been wondering, although you can communicate with natural energy. But as long as you come in contact with natural energy, it will inevitably affect the shape of your body. But you didn't change at all. It seems that Black Lion has put a lot of effort in this regard?" Nangongja heard these words and was a little confused. After all, Li Yang never told him that he helped him control the flow of natural energy into his body. But Li Yang shook his head at this moment. He signaled Nangongja not to talk more. It seems that he didn't want Toad Sage to know the details of this matter. "I don't know, Toad Sage, can you explain to me why I can communicate with natural energy? Whether it's Jiraiya-sama or Fukasaku Shima. It's very clear that natural energy is a great and dangerous power." Nangongja's words entered Immortal Toad's ears without missing a single word. Toad Sage was also very clear about Nangongja's concerns about natural energy. A huge force was like a bomb that could explode at any time if one didn't understand it well enough. That's true. After Li Yang lost contact with him, this method of cultivating inner strength with natural energy appeared. Great Immortal Toad said slowly, but from time to time, he would glance at Li Yang, who was standing by his feet. "Inner strength has a huge flaw. I'm sure you, Nangong, are the clearest about this. That is the danger of becoming a demon. In the long history of the world, there have been countless people who turned into devils after cultivating their inner strength. Among them, there are also quite a number of people who have almost become heavenly demons who have slaughtered the world. However, those who have fallen into the demonic path are actually squandering their potential in life without any scruples. When the power of the bedevilment declines, they will die from exhaustion of their life force. There has never been a lack of geniuses in the world. There was once a brilliant inner strength cultivator who, for some reason, managed to retain a part of his mind after he turned into a demon. As his life force continued to decline, he searched for many ways to save himself. Of course, it was because he had entered the demonic path. His temperament has also become extremely irritable, resulting in many killings. Until he forced his way into the slug's wet-bone forest. The Great Immortal Toad paused for a moment as he spoke. His eyes were filled with helplessness and resentment. This genius who had entered the demonic path defeated the protector of the wet-bone forest, the slug. He took away an important item of the wet-bone forest's immortal technique inheritance. Although I don't know what it is. Thinking about it, Immortal Toad looked at the black sword on Nangongja's back. It has a lot to do with the sword on your back. Natural energy is the power of heaven and earth. It hides a majestic life force. As long as you can suppress the riot of natural energy, you can recover the life force you've lost. Although it can only treat the symptoms and not the root cause, it can still slow down the loss of life force. However, this genius still failed. I've thought about it many times. Why is that? After all, although his way of thinking is a bit too idealistic, but from a theoretical level, this method still has a certain degree of feasibility. After this genius who had entered the demonic path died, this sword was passed down from generation to generation. It seems that the sword intent of this genius is hidden within, and it can guide the path of the sword for future generations. And you are the second person who can use internal force and natural energy at the same time. Although I have inherited the dream technique from the Rikudo Sennin, There are some secrets that I still can't know. Immortal Toad said with an apologetic look in his eyes. I don't know what's going on with these things. Maybe this road that hasn't been finished by others needs you to continue. After saying this, the great Immortal Toad closed his eyes. Clearly he wanted to chase the guests away. Fukasaku Senin also understood the meaning of Immortal Toad at this moment. Obviously he wanted to ask Nangongja and Jiraiya to leave here. And Riang? Fukasaku Senin felt that he really had no way. After all, this Black Lion's seniority was too high. Jiraiya boy and Nangong boy. It seemed like great Immortal Toad and Black Lion Liang were going to say something. It's time for dinner now. Why don't you stay in Mount Mayaboku and have dinner before leaving? Shima Senin suddenly said after leaving the Toad Cave for some distance. When Jiraiya heard such a sentence, his face instantly turned green. Nangongja looked at Jiraiya's strange face and had a bad feeling in his heart. Just as he was about to say something to decline, Shima Senin's sharp eyes looked at Nangongja like a knife. I can't refuse an elder's gift. Since Shima Senin wants to invite me to dinner, then I naturally can't refuse. After a long time, Riang and Immortal Toad seemed to have finished talking. It turned into a stream of light and entered the lion head seal on Nangongja's left arm. After leaving only a sentence, he fell into a deep sleep. And Nangongja? At this moment, his face was green, and it didn't seem to be a good time to talk about business. In the steaming smoke, Nangongja and Jiraiya returned to Woodleaf Village. Without waiting for the smoke to dissipate, Jiraiya covered his mouth and stomach and hurriedly ran back to his home with a wisp of smoke. Oni-san, you're back? Hearing the movement outside, Nangong-ro also opened the door and saw Nangongja with a very ugly face at the moment. What's wrong with you? Why do you look so ugly? Looking at Nangongja's strange look, Nangong-ro quickly ran to Nangongja's side and helped Nangongja into the room. It's nothing. I just ate something I never thought I would eat. At this moment, Nangongja's eyes seemed to be swaying all kinds of insects. Who would have thought that the so-called dinner in Mount Mayaboku was 100 insects feast? Chapter 79. After Nangongja returned from Mount Mayaboku, he lay in bed for 2 days before he recovered. During the meal, he heard that Jiraiya had been practicing senjutsu in Mount Mayaboku during this time. Nangongja couldn't help but think maliciously that Jiraiya deserved to be oppressed. Suffering this kind of punishment was really the best punishment. During this period, Nangong-ro also asked several times. Nangongja went to Mount Mayaboku, and when he came back he became so weak, which really made Nangong-ro very puzzled. But think about it, Nangongja had the nerve to tell Nangong-ro that he went to Mount Mayaboku. He was neither harmed by Jiraiya. He was not embarrassed by the group of powerful toads in Mount Mayaboku. Instead he was defeated by Emil. On this day, Nangong-ro got up early in the morning to prepare breakfast for such a big family. Whether it was Nangongjo or Mishiro, they didn't know how to cook. As for little Linger, Nangong-ro felt that she was not so incompetent that she needed a child to help her cook. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and wore a set of loose pajamas. Just like that, Nangong-ro walked barefoot to the kitchen. After all, this house was built by Woodleaf Village to compensate Nangong's family for the loss, and the design was very novel. Even the kitchen was an open style popular in Woodleaf in recent years. Sitting in the living room, she could also see the situation in the kitchen. Just when Nangong-ro was about to wash her face with the water in the kitchen, she began to prepare to cook. A sound of knife cutting echoed in Nangong-ro's ears. Clang, clang, clang. Obviously it was the sound of cutting vegetables. The sound of the kitchen knife and the kitchen board was endless. It was as if they were playing a cheerful concert. Looking at the hazy familiar figure in front of her, Nangong-ro quickly rubbed her eyes, trying to take a closer look at the person in front of her. Brother? Nangong-ro probed. Her disbelief was self-evident. You're awake? Nangongja stopped what he was doing and turned around to look at his sister, who was standing behind him in a daze. Nangongja's slightly long hair was wrapped in a headscarf. Under the cover of a ray of sunlight outside the window, Nangongja no longer had the indifferent feeling of estrangement that he always had. On the contrary, it made people feel very comfortable. At this moment, Nangongja was no longer the king of hell who dominated the battlefield. Instead, he was more like the ignorant person who struggled to survive in the small town with Nangong-ro. No. I'm not awake yet. I'll go back and sleep first, then we'll talk about other things. Although Nangong-ro kept denying what she saw, the slight smile on her face betrayed Nangong-ro's mood. Alright, stop playing tricks with me. Looking at Nangong Ro's expression, Nangongja felt very amused. He stretched out his slightly wet finger and knocked Nangong Ro's head. I haven't cooked with you for a long time. Do you have to be so surprised? Come on, come on. Although I'm good at cutting vegetables, you're still the one who's cooking, right? If I cook, Little Linger will definitely throw a tantrum again. Little Linger didn't have any bad habits. Most of the time she was very cute. But when it came to food, she had a strict requirement. As long as the situation permitted, she would never compromise as long as she could eat better food. Originally, Nangongja and Mashiro could rely on their ordinary cooking skills to barely feed Little Linger's picky stomach along the way. But ever since Little Linger arrived at Woodleaf and tasted Nangong Ro's cooking, she was no longer willing to eat Nangongja or Mashiro's cooking. Nangong Ro seemed to be enjoying it, and she took on the task of cooking. Nangong Ro stretched out her hand and wiped away the slight traces of water left by Nangongja. Brother is so childish. You only know how to act spoiled with me like this. When Nangong Ro said this, she raised her head proudly. Nangongja looked at his sister's appearance, and for a moment he felt a little speechless. He really wanted to find a mirror and put it in front of his sister, to let her see who was the one acting spoiled now. Yes. It's brother acting spoiled with my Ruru, okay? Then, my Nangong Missy, would you be willing to cook with your spoiled brother? But how could Nangongja speak according to his mood? He could only closely follow Nangong Ro's words and put Nangong Ro on a pedestal. Oh. Nangong Ro pouted at this moment and looked at Nangongja, who was slapping his face in front of her. But soon she put away this expression. Oh. Although I feel like you seem to be thinking of something very rude. But since you've already begged me, then I'll reluctantly make breakfast with you. Hearing Nangong Ro's words, Nangongja's face smiled even more. Sure enough, no matter what his sister was hiding from him, the feelings of living together as well as the trust between them would never change. Some things, if it wasn't the right time to know, then forcing it would only hurt others and hurt oneself. Nangongja believed that when his sister thought it over, she would naturally tell him what was going on. The two of them chatted and laughed as they made breakfast together. It looked so harmonious and sweet. During this time, Mashiro and Little Linger woke up one by one and washed up. Sitting in the living room, Little Linger looked at Nangongja and Nangong Ro with envy. The relationship between brother and Nangong Ne-san is really good. Little Linger seems to want to be like them. Mashiro heard Little Linger's words and agreed with her. After all, the two of them did have a good relationship. There was a faint trace of worry in her heart, but Mashiro didn't say it out loud. After all, it wasn't to the point of being out of control. This was almost the most peaceful day since Nangongja returned to Woodleaf. Whether it was fighting with Nine Tails or being seriously injured and in a coma. Whether it was cultivating the internal force to attract natural energy, or being forced to follow Jiraiya to the dangerous Mount Mayaboku. Indeed, Nangongja had to deal with one thing after another. He was completely exhausted. With such a good opportunity, he could relax. The tense nerves in his mind were slightly relaxed. It was really great. The sun outside the window seemed to take care of Nangongja's good mood, slowly sprinkling the Woodleaf land. Chapter 80. In this way, every day Nangongja and Nangong Ro were responsible for the food of their family. Although it was just some trivial things, Nangongja felt that his whole heart was slowly clearing up. Over the years, Nangongja has almost never rested. He has been trying his best to play the role of a ninja. Every time he went out to perform a task, he didn't care about killing people. It seems that killing people has become a normal part of his life. Every person who was killed by Nangongja slowly turned into a wisp of evil, lingering in Nangongja's heart. Nangongja even thought that his life was almost like this, constantly killing people, constantly in order to keep Nangong Ro away from all the cruel killings. But Nangongja didn't think that there was anything wrong with this, because Nangong Ro was worth everything he had to protect. Such a family member must not be exposed to the blood and killing of the ninja world. Isn't that right? Boy, it seems that you have rested enough. It's time for us to talk about business. After Nangongja fell into a deep sleep, he discovered that his consciousness had once again entered the pure white spiritual space that belonged to him, where he first met Li Yang. I have been wondering, you clearly said that you would talk to me about something after leaving Mount Mayaboku, but you didn't wake up. I didn't expect you to come back so soon. Nangongja looked at the burly figure standing in front of him, sitting cross-legged in front of Li Yang without caring about his image. Although he said that he was blaming Li Yang for not contacting him for so long. But the trace of helplessness in his eyes was obvious. Such a stable and peaceful life, no one is willing to give it up. Nangong boy, do you still remember our original agreement? Li Yang suddenly said. Original? At that time, Nangongja was still a young boy, but maybe he was lucky? On Lion Cry Mountain, Nangongja was guided by Li Yang's remnant soul when he was on the brink of death and formed a familiar contract with Li Yang. Their lives were connected to each other, and that was how Nangongja managed to survive. You mean, I will help you find your clan? Nangongja carefully thought about it and said tentatively. How many years has it been? Nangongja participated in the Sand War, Rock War, and Mist War. There were some missions buried in the depths of the ninja world. Nangongja can be said to have traveled everywhere. However, Li Yang didn't find any traces of her race. Nangongja and Li Yang thought that the lion race was like the countless other races in the long river of history. They had been drowned by the passage of time. But at this moment, Li Yang suddenly mentioned such a thing. After Nangongja left, Li Yang and Toad Sage talked for a long time. Li Yang must have found clues about his clan from the great immortal Toad, right? So that's how it is if I didn't guess wrong. Did Toad Sage tell you the whereabouts of your clan? Nangongja and Li Yang's lives are connected, so there is a lot of estrangement between them. Nangongja voiced out his conjecture. Sure enough, Nangong boy, your brain works fast. Li Yang heard Nangongja's guess and sighed. Nangongja was no longer the naive but pretended to be smart kid that he had met before. It's good that he started to infer other things from one example. Didn't it prove that all the sacrifices he had made in this short period of time were worth it? Although that old Toad's dream technique has various flaws, some things are still worth looking at. My Lion Clan's information was indeed obtained from that old Toad. But to be honest, I really went a bit overboard back then. As a result, the three spiritual beast clans, the Toad, the Snake, and the Slug don't have a particularly friendly relationship with me and even the Lion Clan. So, let's be honest, I don't really trust what the old Toad told me. Although I didn't contact you these days. But I didn't fall into a deep sleep without doing anything. I've been relying on a secret technique to communicate with the spatial coordinates that the old Toad gave me. As Li Yang spoke, she moved aside slightly, revealing a large array behind her. So, is it really okay for you to draw in my spiritual space like this? Nangongja seemed to want to ease the serious atmosphere, so he changed the topic slightly. As for Li Yang? After so many years, what kind of conduct Nangongja had? Was there a need to think about it? With a wave of his hand, the cloak on his body also rose up high. A black and purple energy storm formed behind Li Yang. The formation that covered the ground was instantly cleaned up. This is just a deduction, it doesn't have much of an effect. Although I can't be completely sure that this formation leads to the habitat of my Lion Clan, there are traces of evidence. However, there are many traces that can prove that these coordinates are related to my Lion Clan. Even if there's only a sliver of certainty, I still hope that I can save my clan. The mistake back then was always my fault. What does it have to do with my clan? As Li Yang spoke, she actually became a little agitated. Obviously, there were still some things that Li Yang didn't confess to Nangongja. The so-called sinner who offended the three major clans. These things could be explained in detail for half a night, couldn't they? However, Nangongja didn't mind. Everyone would always bury some things deep in their hearts, right? People who didn't hold anything back never existed. Perhaps this was the biggest reason why humans could evolve step by step and become the spirit of all things, ruling over the human world? It was a kind of self-preservation instinct. It was like the root of all evil. Nangongja clapped his hands and stood up, supporting himself on the ground. His hands weren't idle either, patting the non-existent dust off his body. He looked at Li Yang, who was squatting on the ground in frustration. He picked up his pace and walked over to Li Yang's side. Although Li Yang was much more muscular than him, Nangongja still reached out and placed his hand on Li Yang's shoulder. Li Yang, do you still remember the words you said at Mount Mayaboku? Although it was also because you wanted to intimidate the great Toad Immortal, I also believe that was your life's principle. Survive. Crazy demon. Since you and I have already signed a familiar contract, our lives are intertwined. Why do you need to think so much about it? Although these days have been peaceful and comfortable, I'm still a warrior. But in the end, I am a martial artist born to fight. I've lived too many days like this. I'm not like myself anymore. It doesn't matter if it's for you or for me. I will definitely accompany you on this journey. You want to find your clansmen. I already understand. You and I are one. Aren't your clansmen also my clansmen? This journey may be somewhat difficult and dangerous. But so what? We'll go together. Chapter 81. Boy, hearing Nangong's words, Li Yang fell into a deep melancholy for a while. Although you and I have known each other for only a short time in my long life, you still understand me. However, you still understood me and understood what I wanted. I thought that after the person who fought side by side with me died, no one can be like me anymore. But, very good. Very good. I'm not alone anymore. As Li Yang spoke, tears began to form in her eyes. Her pair of tiger eyes have faded away from the usual majesty and domineering aura. Instead, they were filled with helplessness and relief. Nangongja slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said with a little bit of ridicule, "A dignified man like you actually made a little girl's attitude. Li Yang, you really made me look down on you. It's just going to a secret realm outside this world, what's there to be afraid of?" Although Nangongja said it simply, the danger is self-evident. Since Li Yang has just begun to deduce the space array, it can be said that the place where the Lion Clan lives should be like Mount Miyaboku Shikatsu Forest and the Earth Dragon Cave. It's independent of the ninja world, but it's attached to the ninja world. Because now Li Yang just listened to a few words of the great sage and speculated about the Lion Clan's habitat. If the great immortal toad had some ulterior motives, he would modify the formation slightly. Then, if the person who entered the formation was lucky, they would be exiled into a crack in space. If the person was unlucky, there was a high possibility that they would be sucked into a spatial storm. Not to mention the bones, even the soul will be torn apart in an instant. This can be said to be a very risky business. Everyone says that they can sacrifice themselves, but since ancient times, the easiest thing is death and the most difficult thing is death. People will die for some seemingly small reasons. So, death is easy. However, when a person knew that his actions would most likely lead him to his death and that there was another way to survive, it would be extremely difficult for him to do so. How many people are willing to die? So, death is the most difficult thing. Boy, you can rest assured. I will try my best to deduce this array and try to find the loopholes and unstable factors in it, so that this operation can be carried out smoothly. But, you also have to be prepared. Although spatial rifts and spatial storms were traps that could destroy a person's body and soul, they were still very powerful. But there is also the power of nature. If you can rely on your own strength to summon a stronger force of nature, then you will be able to save my own life. Li Yang said these words to Nangongja very seriously, then turned around and waved his hand. The array that had just dissipated instantly reappeared, and a pair of eyes stared closely at some of the minute details of the array. No longer talked to Nangongja. Nangongja also understood Li's mood, so he didn't say anything more. Instead, he quietly left the spiritual space and left this place to Li Yang so that he could deduce in peace. But then he thought of his younger sister, Mashiro, and Ling. Nangongja suddenly felt a headache coming on. How long had it been peaceful? He had to leave the wood leaf again. He might even encounter a lot of danger. Nangongja didn't know how to explain it to Nangongro. He opened the door to the courtyard, and the white moonlight shone into Nangongja's room. The burst of natural energy last time had caused the spring in the courtyard to continue. Therefore, the cherry blossom tree in the middle of the courtyard was still blooming with cherry blossoms. The faint smell of cherry blossoms slowly drifted into Nangongja's nose. Phew! Nangongja let out a long breath. He picked up the black sword beside him, wore a loose bathrobe and stepped into the courtyard. Whenever his mood was fluctuating and there was no one to talk to, Nangongja would often practice his sword to sort out his chaotic mind. Nangongja didn't use his internal strength, but because of his physical strength and the speed of his sword. Waves of wind were produced involuntarily. The cherry blossoms broke away from their receptacles and the petals scattered. One petal after another drifted in the air. The heavens seemed to have sensed Nangongja's mood. Pieces of slightly cold snowflakes drifted down from the sky. The cherry blossom petals and the snowflakes intertwined in the air, dancing together. The cherry blossom color and the pure white of the snowflakes harmonized together. Such a scene that defied the laws of nature actually happened in the courtyard of the Nangong residence without a sound. Nangongja tried his best to empty his mind. He could only practice his sword. Sometimes he waved it, sometimes he stabbed it. Sometimes he cut it, sometimes he cut it. They were all very simple moves. However, simple did not mean powerless. Any Chunin would be killed in an instant in front of such swordsmanship. After an unknown period of time, the moon, which was originally in the middle of the sky, slowly approached the horizon. The sun seemed to be climbing up from the eastern horizon. The sun and the moon seemed to exist in the sky at the same time, resonating with each other. The sun and the moon were shining together at this moment. Nangongja also stopped waving his sword. He raised his hand and tossed the black sword into the air. The black sword was firmly inserted into the scabbard beside him. Come out. After so many years, I didn't notice you peeping at me. Nangongja looked at the corner of the room, knowing that his sister was hiding there. You know that you can find me every time. Can't you let me think that you can't find me? Nangong-ro, who was also wearing pajamas, walked out from the corner of the room. She muttered something in her mouth. Nangongja did not answer Nangong-ro. He just reached for the black sword beside him and stepped into the corridor of the room. However, just as Nangongja was about to say something, Nangong-ro reached out a finger and pressed Nangongja's mouth. Nangong-ro shook her head and blinked her big eyes. She looked at her brother standing in front of her with a bit of heartache and pity. After so many years, brother, you have sacrificed a lot for me to live a good life. Although I don't know everything, I know at least 70 to 80% of it. These days, brother, although you have been happily accompanying me, Sister Mashiro, and little Linger to live a normal life. But I know that, brother, you don't belong here. You still yearn for a life full of possibilities, a life full of passion. So, go. This home will always be here waiting for you. When you are tired, you can come here and have a good rest. After Nangong-ro finished speaking, she pulled Nangongja and walked into the room. It snowed last night and it seems a lot colder outside. Let's go make breakfast for Sister Mashiro and little Linger, shall we? After hearing his sister's words, Nangongja could only nod and smile. Okay, let's go make breakfast. Chapter 82. Nangongja was sitting quietly in his room. His surroundings were silent, and only the faint sound of Nangongja's breathing could be heard from time to time. The black sword was quietly placed in front of Nangongja, emitting its own light. It was obvious that Nangongja had been polishing this sword recently. Kacha? The door to Nangongja's room was opened. A burly figure could only be vaguely seen under the sunlight outside the door. Get. The formation is ready, it's time for us to leave. The voice was mighty and deep. That's right, it was Nangongja's familiar, Liang in human form. After Nangongja practiced his sword that night, Nangongja clearly explained to Nangong-ro what he was going to do. Nangongja thought that his sister would definitely stop him from doing such a dangerous thing. However, to Nangongja's surprise, Nangong-ro did not say anything. She just turned around and left. For the past few days, even when Nangongja summoned Liang to carve a formation in their courtyard, Nangong-ro did not say anything. She just watched quietly, which made Nangongja slightly worried. Humans? What a strange creature. You don't want your loved ones to stop you from doing dangerous things, but when your loved ones don't stop you, you start to worry about your gains and losses. This subtle state of mind reverberated in Nangongja's mind for a long time. Nangongja picked up the black sword in front of him and followed Liang into the courtyard. His sister, Mashiro, and little Linger all stood at the edge of the formation, watching Nangongja and Liang walk over. Brother? Nangong-ro looked at her brother as if she wanted to say something. However, she swallowed all the words that were about to come out of her mouth. There was only one sentence left: come back alive. Hearing his sister's request and the eager gazes from Mashiro and little Linger, Nangongja felt a chill down his spine. For a moment, Nangongja actually had the thought of not following Liang into the secret realm. However, very quickly Nangongja suppressed this feeling deep in his heart. This was the strongest desire that Liang expressed to him since his life was connected to him. He had no reason to stop him, nor should he. Without Yang's help, Nangongja would have died to death. To return, I'll come back safely. Don't forget that I can now draw on the power of nature. Some dangers are nothing to me. As Nangongja spoke, he nodded at his sister, Mashiro, and little Linger. Looking at his brother's gaze, Nangongja didn't know what to say. He could only look at Nangongja without saying anything. Liang, protect me. Let's give it a try together. Nangongja said to Liang. Of course. No matter how difficult it is, you and I will go together. This is the rule set by our contract. Before Li Yang's voice fell, his body began to slowly dissipate, turning into a black stream of light that wrapped around Nangongja's body. The black armor slowly revealed itself. The black armor now seemed to be very different from when Nangongja first summoned it. The armor that was originally as bright as a mirror was now filled with cracks. Some of the cracks were very small, so it was hard to notice. However, some of the cracks were very large, as wide as a finger. Some of these cracks were distributed in insignificant areas, while others were distributed in fatal areas. Moreover, the more fatal the areas were, the denser the cracks. Nangongja hadn't summoned this black armor for a long time, but all the cracks on it reminded Nangongja of every difficult battle he had gone through. Heaven and earth, heed my command. Nangongja raised his black sword, and a mysterious sword mark left behind a few traces in the air. There seemed to be some fluctuations around Nangongja. It was originally difficult to detect, but as Nangongja drew more and more sword marks in the air, the fluctuations became more and more intense. A storm seemed to quietly form around Nangongja. Whether it was air, light, or other things that could be detected or not, they all began to condense and compress around Nangongja. Nangongja ordered, and the magic circle in front of him began to spin violently. As it spun faster and faster, the magic circle became smaller and smaller. The originally huge magic circle slowly shrunk to the size of a person, and gradually approached Nangongja's body. Slowly, the magic circle began to merge with Nangongja's black armor. Originally, Nangongja's armor had many runes that emitted a faint blue light. When the magic circle completely merged with Nangongja's black armor, half of the runes on the black armor seemed to have been activated, and they emitted a brilliant light that was as bright as the Milky Way. The cracks on the armor slowly began to repair. The brilliance of the black armor also began to become brighter and brighter. It seemed to have reached a peak. Now, when the energy had accumulated to a certain extent, Nangongja heard Li Yang's voice in his mind. Nangongja naturally knew what Li Yang meant. This magic circle condensed a huge amount of Li Yang's power and allowed the Li Yang's power to resonate with the Lion Clan's power. This magic circle was used to locate the Lion Clan's location. The best power to activate the magic circle was undoubtedly the natural energy, which represented the power of the heavens and earth. Nangongja was controlling the natural energy to support himself, not only to give himself a boost, but also to use himself as a relay point to provide energy for the magic circle. Activate. Find the Lion Clan's key. Nangongja roared loudly, as if he was venting the excess natural energy in his body. He fiercely stabbed the black sword in his hand into the center of the magic circle. The runes on the magic circle were activated, emitting a green vitality, and spontaneously rotating. For a while, the light of the magic circle was pushed to the extreme, and a huge green beam of light went straight into the sky. It lasted for 3 minutes, and the huge force alarmed many Konoha ninjas to come here. But they only saw one of the Sannin Jiraiya, standing in front of Nangongja's house. Everyone who came to investigate also tactfully went back. Nangongja, such a huge amount of natural energy can be used by you. Such talent and power is simply terrifying. I hope you won't become the enemy of Woodleaf in the future. Jiraiya said, but he could only shake his head. Because Jiraiya found that he really couldn't do anything about such a thing. When the light beam dissipated, Jiraiya left Nangongja's house. A person with a bit of loss walked to a ward in Kiba Hospital, which was guarded by many Woodleaf ninjas. Chapter 83. The intense light made Nangongja dizzy and blurry for a while. When Nangongja could see the scene in front of him again, Nangongja found himself in a world that had transcended his own reality. It was a world that was completely different from Lu Li's. How to say it? It was like the points, lines, surfaces, and bodies of the world he had been living in. And all kinds of colors were no longer familiar to him. Looking around, Nangongja realized that it was different from the pure whiteness of his spiritual space. Instead, it seemed that all kinds of colors began to mix together. If he looked carefully in one direction, he would find that all the colors that he knew, or even those that he didn't know, were emerging from time to time. And around his body, there were also strands of transparent energy ribbons, fluttering and dancing. Li Yang? Is this outside the space? Nangongja murmured as if he was talking to Li Yang, who was attached to his body and turned into a black armor, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. No. To be precise, where we are now is in the gap between our shinobi world and other small worlds attached to it. It's like a thin film of a big soap bubble combined with a small soap bubble. If we really reach the outside of the space, then our body, our soul, and everything that can represent our existence will be shattered in less than an instant. Li Yang said very indifferently, as if she had been in such a gap in space more than once. Since you have been studying the formation for so long, how are we going to find the small world where the Lion Clan lives? Nangongja didn't want to continue to discuss these topics about space with Li Yang, because with Nangong's current level of knowledge, isn't it a bit too advanced? Things are always like this, the operation is very simple, but the real understanding is very difficult. It's like you have a computer, you also know the functions of the graphics card, memory, kernel, and many other things. But if you really want to describe their detailed structure, I believe that very few people can explain it clearly. However, computers are still man-made, there are always people who understand it. As for such a high-end topic like space, believe me, as long as you can discover even the slightest of secrets, it will be enough to benefit you and even the entire world for the rest of your life. Do you see the belt of light around your body? Li Yang said, these ribbons of light are actually a combination of the formation's power and natural energy. He is like a safety rope that keeps you in contact with the shinobi world without breaking away from it. They protect you from the pull of space, allowing you to stabilize your existence in the crevice of space. As Li Yang spoke, a dark purple energy belt appeared in front of Nangongzhe. The energy ribbon in front of you right now was made by me with my own strength. Catch it. It will take us to where we want to go. When Nangongzhe heard Li Yang's words, he opened his right hand and grabbed the purple ribbon. Nangongzhe felt an inexplicable attraction force acting on his body. As if he was swimming, Nangongzhe wandered in the strange sea of space crevice. However, the transparent energy ribbon around his body was constantly dissipating, and green or blue particles began to slowly drift away. Behind Nangongzhe a long tail was left. Hurry up. The protection of the energy ribbon is not permanent. If we can't enter a stable space before the energy is exhausted, we will be dragged out of the space. As for the consequences, I believe that I have made it very clear, haven't I? Concentrate, it will make you move faster. Li Yang also reminded Nangongzhe in his ear how urgent and precious time was. I know. I will find the location of the Lion Clan space as soon as possible. After Nangongzhe responded to this sentence, the two didn't talk anymore. Because Li Yang also had to concentrate to find the traces of her clan. Just like that, the beautiful scenery became meaningless in the eyes of the two. They just buried their heads and did what they were supposed to do. The search continued. The light ribbons were still dissipating. In addition, the light ribbons were getting thinner and thinner. There were originally 40 to 50 ribbons tightly wrapped around Nangongzhe, but now there were only 6 left. As for the Lion Clan's small space, there was still no trace of it. Kid? After a long period of silence, Li Yang finally spoke. Her tone was full of disappointment and self-blame. It seems that today is not a good day. When Nangongzhe heard Li Yang's words, his whole body trembled. No. We have to continue searching. Nangongzhe shook his head and said firmly and persistently. Look at the light ribbons around you. We don't have much time. No matter how strong I am, I have lost my body and can't use my full strength. Moreover, in such a situation, even if I was at my peak, there is nothing I can do. Li Yang's words were very sincere, because Li Yang compared her understanding of the space with the current situation and couldn't find a way to break the situation. Nangongzhe didn't continue to hold the purple ribbons in his hand, which had become at least 3 times thinner than before. The light particles emitted from his body didn't know the anxiety in their hearts, and they were still emitting light. The light particles passed through Nangongzhe's coat, face, and left Nangongzhe's hair, floating to the corner of the space. Li Yang, at that time I was just a kid who didn't know anything. You're just a brat with a bit of cleverness. You're the one who taught me what courage is. You're the one who allowed me to bravely face my responsibilities and the dangers that I'll face in the future. Without you there is no me. We will survive, although I don't know where this confidence comes from. I believe that we will definitely find the habitat of the Lion Clan and can safely return to the ninja world. What we need to do now is not to give up. We are halfway through our journey. Keep going. Continue. Continue. In the gap of space, sound can't be transmitted, but at this moment, Nangongzhe's shout seems to have exceeded this limit, and the whole space seems to be trembling slightly under the roar of Nangongzhe. Outside of the attention of Nangongzhe and Li Yang, the black sword on Nangongzhe's back was emitting a burst of white brilliance at this moment. The brilliance also expanded in an instant until Nangongzhe's whole body was wrapped in it. Chapter 84. At this moment, Nangongzhe was in a daze as if he was hit in the head by a heavy hammer, and his consciousness was blurred. His eyes looked as if they were glued together. Even with all his strength, he only managed to open a small crack. He could only vaguely see the darkness in front of him and a faint blood-red shadow. Feeling his body, he found that he could no longer feel the weight of the black armor. Riang? Nan Gongzhi tried to summon his familiar, the black lion Li Yang, whose life was linked to his. But there was no response at all. Ugh. Nan Gongzhi used all the strength in his body and used his arms to turn himself from a collapsed state to a cross-legged state. Circulating the internal energy in his body, which was almost exhausted, he tried to restore a little vitality to his body. But the operation of his internal energy became extremely obscure, like a car stuck in a quagmire. He could only struggle slightly to move forward. It seems that this place is still outside the shinobi world. I can no longer feel the familiar natural energy that I can use. Nan Gongzhi circulated the internal energy in his body several times, relieving his tired spirit, and also allowing his body to move. Then he opened his eyes and began to check his condition. At this moment, the black armor that was originally attached to his body had disappeared without a trace. The lion seal that was attached to Riang's body was also covered with a layer of dim luster. As for the black sword that accompanied him for a long time, at this moment, it was inserted diagonally 2 feet in front of him. No matter what, I have to hold the black sword in my hand. Although my internal energy can't do much, I can still use it to increase my self-defense ability. Although in such a predicament, Nan Gongzhi didn't panic. Instead, he began to think about how to protect himself. Nan Gongzhi supported himself with his hands on the ground, and began to move himself little by little to the place where the black sword was. Obviously, the distance was only 2 feet, but Nan Gongzhi walked for a full 5 minutes to reach the black sword. Old friend, it looks like I'll have to rely on you to get through this dangerous situation. Looking at the black sword in front of him, Nan Gongzhi could not help but shake his head as he muttered to himself with complicated emotions. As for the black sword, it was still stuck in the ground, waiting for its owner to pick it up again. Nan Gongzhi reached out his right hand and grasped the slightly rough hilt of the black sword. But at this moment, the black sword erupted with an intense brilliance, and the surrounding darkness seemed to be expelled by the brilliance of the black sword. However, what Nan Gongzhi did not expect was that the darkness around him was not the only thing that was expelled, but also him, the owner of the black sword. The powerful shockwave violently pushed Nan Gongzhi away. His already weak body landed heavily on the ground. A thin trace of blood appeared at the corner of Nan Gongzhi's mouth. Nan Gongzhi did not wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He only stared blankly at the black sword that had accompanied him on the battlefield day and night. Thief, are you the one who touched my calamity sword? A voice broke Nan Gongzhi's dazed state. Nan Gongzhi focused his gaze and saw a handsome young man wearing a blood-red robe standing next to the black sword that had sent him flying. The calamity sword you're talking about is this black sword? Nan Gongzhi probed. Black sword? When the man in blood-red heard Nan Gongzhi's description of the black sword, he suddenly laughed out loud. This sword was forged from a strange stone that I took from the Shikal forest. Its hilt, its sword guard, and its blade were all polished by me bit by bit. After I forged it, the heavens and earth seemed unable to tolerate it. Calamity lightning struck down and caused cracks to appear on its originally smooth body. The man in blood-red seemed to recall the past. He pulled out the black sword and placed it horizontally in front of him. He used his fingers to gently touch the cracks on the black sword with a trace of regret and joy. But I never thought that the calamity lightning would bestow this sword with a true soul. From then on, it became a spiritual sword that could communicate with the heavens and earth. It was the calamity lightning that forged it. It was the calamity lightning that created it. So I named it the calamity sword. A cool breeze blew over and lifted a few strands of hair in front of the man's face, revealing a pair of sword-like eyes. Cold stars seemed to surge in the depths of the man's eyes. Every glance was as sharp as a sword that was brandished. How can you touch such a sword? How can you look down on it? The man in blood-red flicked his wrist. The black sword, or rather the calamity sword, carried a sharp sword aura as it pointed directly at Nan Gongzhi's throat. He is your sword, but he is also my sword. Nan Gongzhi looked at the man in front of him. He had a few guesses about his identity. However, Nan Gongzhi did not back down. His words were firm. The man let out a low groan. An enormous murderous aura and blood aura surged from his body. The blood-red robe made clanking noises as if it was a suit of armor, reflecting a metallic luster. The blood aura and murderous aura slowly condensed into a picture behind the man. It was a sea of blood and corpses. Some people were struggling, some were screaming, and some were crying. However, standing beside these people were sinister and demonic figures. Blood sea. Nangongja did not know why, but he actually said the name of the picture. Oh, you are quite knowledgeable. This is the condensation of my murderous aura and blood aura. It is the Azura Blood Sea picture that can help me suppress living beings and kill my enemies. Since you know it, I might as well let you have a taste of it. The man in the blood-red robe was slightly surprised when he heard that Nangongja knew the picture. However, his gaze immediately returned to its original cold and fierce state. He waved the calamity sword. The Azura Blood Sea picture behind him seemed to have heard some instructions and suppressed Nangongja's body. From afar, Nangongja looked like one of the living beings trapped in the Azura Blood Sea picture. He was drowned in the sea of blood and was tortured by the Azura. Cough cough. The thick blood aura seemed to have condensed and became extremely dense. After Nangongja breathed in some of it into his lungs, he began to cough heavily. His heart also seemed to be suppressed by some kind of force. It felt like it was being pricked by a needle. Waves of pain came from it. Everyone is born with sin. The Azura Blood Sea picture will calculate a person's various sins one by one. Then it will use the sin as a power to suppress the person suppressed within. As long as you have this sin, you will always be suppressed in the sea of blood. You will never be able to escape. The man in the blood-red robe's cold eyes seemed to carry some pity as he looked at Nangongja, who was trapped in the Azura Blood Sea picture. He took out a gourd from his back and poured a scarlet liquid into his mouth. Chapter 85. As the blood energy surged into Nangongja's body, Nangongja's consciousness began to blur. His entire body became extremely sleepy. Just a little bit more and Nangongja would fall into a deep sleep. But just as Nangongja was about to lose consciousness, a hand grabbed onto Nangongja's ankle. In an instant, Nangongja's sleepy consciousness became clear. He was surrounded by a blood-red ocean. That's right, it was an ocean. Half of his body was submerged in this blood-red, viscous ocean. Nangongja forcefully kicked his leg upwards, flinging away the person who was grabbing onto his ankle. The person in front of Nangongja could no longer be considered a person. Half of his head had been cut off diagonally. The yellow and white matter inside scattered into the air with the force of Nangongja's kick. His fleshless mouth opened, emitting a hoarse voice. Nangongja, Yama, do you remember me? That's right, you wouldn't remember a small pawn like me. I'm just someone who had half his head chopped off by you. I used to be a coward, but now, there are countless people like me coming to find you. It wasn't hard to tell from the words of the withered corpse that this person was one of the people he had killed. Nangongja indeed had no recollection of such a person. Come out, my companions. The withered corpse stretched out his arms, and a huge blood-red wave appeared behind him. Within the blood-red wave were many withered corpses that had either been stabbed in the heart or had lost an arm or a leg. They bared their teeth and pounced on Nangongja. Some grabbed onto Nangongja's arm, while others grabbed onto Nangongja's leg. Anything that could be grabbed was grabbed by these withered corpses. Some of the withered corpses even opened their tattered mouths and bit Nangongja. It was just a bite, but Nangongja felt a heart-wrenching pain. If he had to describe it, it was as if a piece of his soul had been bitten off. So that's how it is. It's not that I haven't fallen into a deep sleep, but that I've already fallen into a deep sleep. Did the blood energy of the Azura Blood Sea diagram invade my body and pull my soul into this space? Nangongja already had some vague guesses. He also understood some of the uses of the Azura Blood Sea chart. You're right. This Azura Blood Sea is real. It's a power that can be sublimated into a type of blood energy and killing intent that can be used on the soul. Enjoy it. The image of the blood-red clothed young man appeared above Nangongja's head. It was pitch black and there were faint surges of lightning in the sky. Nangongja endured the pain of his soul being torn apart. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the image of the blood-red clothed young man. Are you helpless? Are you in pain? Looking at Nangongja's appearance, the blood-red clothed young man actually laughed out loud. The helplessness and pain you're feeling right now isn't caused by me. It's because of what you've done. When Nangongja heard the words of the blood-red clothed young man, there was a slight struggle in his eyes. He seemed to want to say something to refute the young man's point of view. However, the immense pain made Nangongja unable to open his mouth. Nangongja, think about it carefully. Since you joined the Woodleaf, how many people have died under your sword? It's undeniable that many of them deserve to die. However, do all of them deserve to die? The blood-red clothed young man's huge figure in the pitch-black sky suddenly became small. He landed on the huge blood-red wave in front of Nangongja. The blood-red clothed young man rolled up his sleeves and reached out his hand to pull out a small figure from the blood-red wave. I didn't expect this. You didn't even let go of such a small baby? When the blood-red clothed young man showed the thing in his hand, Nangongja finally saw it clearly. It was a baby who was at most 2 months old. There was a long bloodstain on the baby's neck. The baby's death was probably caused by its throat being cut. Huff, huff. Because its throat was cut, the baby could not cry normally. It could only make an ear-piercing noise like a rag being blown by a strong wind. Nangongja recognized the baby. It was a child from the mountain village that he had wiped out. It was also the only baby that he remembered that he had killed. When the blood-red clothed young man lifted the baby also saw Nangongja. The baby's eyes, which were closed, were now wide open. Its eyes looked extremely terrifying. The white of its eyes had turned black. Even its irises were pitch black. Streaks of blood-red streaks were distributed in the baby's eyes like a spider web. Huff. The baby struggled as if it wanted to crawl to Nangongja's side. Its mouth was wide open, revealing sharp canine teeth that did not belong to a human at all. It seems like you've recognized the person who killed you. The blood-red clothed young man seemed to have finally noticed the baby's desperation. He reached out his hand to touch the baby's head that was only covered with a thin layer of black hair. He then threw the baby to Nangongja's side. Go. Let him have a good taste of your own anger. The baby was thrown quite a distance away from Nangongja. Therefore, the baby could only use its tender hands and feet to crawl over the pile of dried and decayed corpses. The baby was stained with the blood of countless dried corpses. It left a long trail of blood wherever it went. Finally, the baby crawled to Nangongja's head that was not covered by the dried corpses. The baby used its small hand to grab Nangongja's hair that was originally floating in the air, but was now covered in blood. At this moment, the baby's small hand exploded with great strength. It grabbed a few strands of Nangongja's hair and even his scalp that was still stained with blood. Huff, huff. The baby seemed to have discovered something interesting as it made a huff sound from its mouth. Then it opened its mouth with sharp canine teeth and bit Nangongja's head. Blood flowed out of the baby's mouth and turned into streaks of blood that streaked across Nangongja's face. Nangongja's face that was already distorted from the pain became even more ferocious. Deep down in your heart, you've always thought that you're not a person who only knows how to kill. However, you've long become a killing machine. The blood-red clothed young man's body flashed and he squatted in front of Nangongja. His pair of dark eyes stared at Nangongja as if he could see through Nangongja's heart. Now, look at the mountains of corpses and seas of blood that you've killed. Can you still shamelessly say that you're still a person? The blood-red clothed young man's lips curled into a charming yet cruel smile. Chapter 86. In a secluded cave, Li Yang, who was wearing a black cloak, stared at Nangongja, who was sitting in front of him, as well as the black sword that was stabbed into a huge rock that was engraved with complicated formations. Li Yang's eyes were slightly bloodshot and he could not hide his tiredness. This proved that Li Yang had been staring at Nangongja for quite some time. I didn't expect that the genius of the younger generation to be like me. Although his physical body was destroyed, he did not truly die. Instead, he was attached to this black sword. Li Yang looked at Nangongja. He was both happy and worried. Nangongja is quite brave. I can't believe he accepted such a dangerous trial. However, if he can pass it, his state of mind will improve greatly. If anything goes wrong, both Nangongja and I will die. Li Yang shook his head. He did not know how to help Nangongja. In the current situation, Nangongja was the only one who could save himself. However, Li Yang could feel that Nangongja's soul had become extremely unstable recently. It was on the verge of collapsing. It seemed like he was only a hair away from dying completely. Li Yang could not be at ease letting Nangongja stay here alone. Hence, he could only stare at Nangongja for a bit of peace of mind. Not bad, little thief. It's been 7 days and you haven't fainted even once. You're quite tough. The man in the blood-red shirt looked at Nangongja below him. Although he was praising him, his tone was extremely unfriendly. So what? As long as you're still trapped in the Azura Blood Sea diagram, you can't escape. The man's sword-like eyes emitted a mesmerizing glow. He stared at Nangongja's eyes that were filled with resentment and fatigue. The man in the blood-red shirt raised his right foot and stepped on Li Yang's head. With a push, he stepped on Nangongja's head, which was not drowned by the sea of corpses, into the sea of corpses. The surrounding withered corpses seemed to be extremely excited to have completely devoured Nangongja. They let out a battle-like roar. The crimson-robed man turned around and his figure blurred before he disappeared. However, there was still a faintly discernible sentence left behind. I hope this junior can transcend as soon as possible. These were the most difficult 7 days of Nangongja's life. During these 7 days, Nangongja felt the pain of his soul being torn apart. Every day, every moment. Every time, there would be a familiar but unfamiliar corpse attached to Nangongja's body. It would use its sharp claws to tear his body apart and use its sharp teeth to gnaw at his flesh. But after the flesh was eaten, it would regrow in an instant. Every moment, fresh and intense pain assaulted Nangongja. Nangongja had already thought about giving up. It was fine to completely sink into the Azura Blood Sea diagram. At least he wouldn't have to experience such pain. But every time he was on the verge of sinking, Nangongja would subconsciously wake up. It was as if his body had accumulated some strange power that would always wake him up when he was about to lose consciousness. Nangongja endured like this for 7 days. Who are you? Why won't you let me sink completely? I'm in so much pain. It's really painful. I don't want to be like this anymore. I killed all these people. Those babies, those men, those women. Although I don't recognize all of their faces, there are still some familiar figures among them. They came to take my life. I admit it. I'm willing to return it to them. Why do you still want me to stay awake? Nangongja roared. Nangongja roared. At this moment, Nangongja was like a severely injured beast. He could only vent his emotions in this way. Oni-san, so you were called Yama? Only I, Yama, can decide life and death. It's very impressive. Suddenly, such a sentence appeared in Nangongja's mind. The person who spoke had a clear voice like the sound of banging ornaments. It was fresh and pleasant. Most importantly, Nangongja felt that it was very familiar. Nangongja only knew one person with such a voice. It was his sister, Nangongro. Thinking back to the time when the Third Ninja World War finally ended. He also returned to Woodleaf Village for a short rest. That day, Nangongja was sitting at home in a daze. Nangongja opened the door and walked in. He said to Nangongja excitedly, Oni-san, Oni-san. Many people on the battlefield got a very powerful nickname. The ninja we know called Minato Watergate was called Golden Flash. Sounds very powerful. Do you have a powerful nickname, Oni-san? Looking at Nangongro's hopeful face, Nangongja smiled. It's just that I've killed so many people that people are afraid of me. Many people seem to have started calling me Yama. Yama? Hearing Nangongja say this, Nangongro murmured again. Oni-san, so you were called Yama? Only I, Yama, can decide life and death. It's very impressive. With that, Nangongro's face showed a bright smile. The Third Ninja World War for Nangongja was the battle that killed the most people. But for Nangongro's family, it was the most dazzling glory. Decide life and death? Only I, Yama. Although Nangongja was particularly powerless at the moment, these 2 short sentences were extremely energetic. Every single word was firm and shocking. The corpses that were tightly stacked around him seemed to be frightened at this moment. They all took a small step back. Only I, Yama, can decide life and death. Nangongja repeated it again. This time, his words were even more forceful. It seemed that he had recovered to his peak state, no longer tired after 7 days of torture. Behind Nangongja, there was also a huge cloud of black fog. Slowly, the black fog began to solidify and turned into a man wearing a red official robe, with a green face and fangs. He held a book of life and death in his arms, and a judge's pen in his hand. You have your endless vengeful spirits and Azuras, but I have my own Yamaking judgment. No matter who it is, no matter how they die, it will be up to me. Nangongja waved his hand, and Yama behind him seemed to understand the meaning of Nangongja. Yama's body expanded at least 3 or 4 times in an instant, and his original green face and fangs looked even more ferocious at this moment. Life and death I will decide. A low voice came from Yama's mouth. For a moment, the entire world of the Bloody Sea became quiet. Originally, it was just a sentence, but at this moment, it resounded throughout the Bloody Sea world. Chapter 87. Nangongja's Yama avatar was glaring at him with a ferocious expression. However, his furious eyes revealed an extreme calmness. You killed 162 people in your lifetime, 76 of which were women and children. I hereby sentence you to eternal hell. Looking at one of the souls in the corpse, Yama opened the book of life and death in his arms. After carefully counting the sins of the soul, he drew a line on the book of life and death with the judge's pen in his hand. A medium-sized black hole opened right under the corpse's feet, and waves of wails came out from the black hole. Roar, roar. The corpse seemed to have lost its ability to speak. It could only roar and struggle. It hoped to escape the black hole's gravitational pull, but it was all in vain. It could only fall. After the withered corpse fell into the black hole, the aura of the king of hell behind Nangongja seemed to have risen slightly. Yama let out a satisfied grunt. After that, Yama's figure became slightly blurry, and countless human-sized avatars of Yama split off from Yama's main body, standing in front of the deceased souls. I hereby sentence you to reincarnation. I hereby sentence you to eternal hell. I hereby sentence you to 10 years in prison. Voices of judgment rang out in the Azura Blood Sea diagram. Every soul was judged based on what they had done in life. The mountain of corpses and the sea of blood shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye under Yama's judgment. Finally, when all the souls were sentenced by Yama behind Nangongje, the thick blood and murderous aura became extremely weak. As expected, Lord Li Yang said you would be able to form your own force through the Azura Blood Sea diagram. Lord Li Yang's judgment is more accurate. The crimson-robed man who had pushed Nangongje into the sea of blood with a cold expression was now clapping his hands with a smile on his face as he looked at Nangongje, who was standing on the spot and digesting the power of his Yama avatar. If I'm not mistaken, you're the one who broke into the Shikol forest and stole their legacy item, right? Nangongje looked at the blood-robed man and said quietly. His eyes were filled with 30% respect and 70% vigilance. It was enough to show that Nangongje was afraid of the man in the blood-red shirt. I didn't expect you to know something about me. Hearing Nangongje's words, the man in the blood-red shirt was a little surprised, but his eyes were still calm. Everyone said that it was because I was possessed by the devil that I barged into the Shikatsa forest and stole their sacred item. However, how many people know that this so-called inheritance belonging to the slug originally belonged to us, the inheritors of inner strength? After hearing the man's words, Nangongje's mind was in a mess. The inherited holy relic belongs to us? Not bad. The man in the blood-red shirt nodded and proved his words. As everyone knows, inner strength and chakra belong to different cultivation systems. Chakra can't be used with inner strength. So why is this sacred item passed down from the Shikol forest so perfectly used by us, the cultivators of inner strength? Naturally, it's because it originally belonged to us. Back then when I heard the news, I barged into the Shikol forest and stole it. I forged this Heaven's Calamity sword and left a trace of hope for my inner strength. The man in the blood-red shirt's explanation was very clear. However, Nangongje did not want to believe him completely. Anyone who was possessed by the devil had a strange way of thinking. This person could forcefully resist the chaotic thoughts of the devil, but it did not mean that he was not affected at all. Hee kid, you're really cautious. Fine. I can understand if you don't believe me completely. The man in the blood-red shirt said with a smile. However, the smile on his face slowly disappeared. Although you passed the first trial, I still don't fully agree that you can be the owner of the Heaven's Calamity sword. After hearing what the man in the blood-red shirt said, Nangongje's heart skipped a beat. All of a sudden he leaped. The man in the blood-red shirt appeared where Nangongje was originally standing. The Heaven's Calamity sword was stabbed into the ground. If Nangongje did not dodge just now, he would have been injured. Here. The man in the blood-red shirt waved his hand and threw a wooden sword in Nangongje's direction. Since you're a swordsman, how can you not use a sword? The wooden sword flew towards Nangongje with a strong gust of wind. Nangongje reached out his right hand and grabbed the wooden sword's hilt. However, the huge force forced Nangongje to turn his body to remove the force from the wooden sword. When Nangongje grasped the wooden sword in his hand firmly, his essence, chi, and spirit became completely different from before. It was as if he had entrusted everything to the sword. The art of sacrificing mind? Not bad. The man in the blood-red shirt saw Nangongje's state and smiled slightly. However, he immediately pounced on Nangongje. One move after another, although there were no subtle changes. Every time he attacked the enemy's most vulnerable areas and hurt the enemy's defenseless areas. In just one move, Nangongje's body was covered in blood. Is that it? It's still a bit lacking. Nangongje looked at the man in the blood-red shirt's mocking eyes. An inexplicable anger appeared in his heart without any warning. Ha! Nangongje shouted and his hands moved. He displayed the fatal 13 swords that Nangong Ro had taught him one by one. One move after another, the killing intent continued to accumulate. The fatal 13 swords? The man in the blood-red shirt recognized Nangong's sword moves at a glance. There was a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. Do you know that I created this set of sword moves? The man in the blood-red shirt also changed his sword moves. He had been defending against Nangong's continuous sword moves. Now he had turned all of his defenses into attacks. They were fighting attacks with attacks. The two men's sword moves were getting more and more open. One could only see faint shadows. Finally, one of them seemed to have been hit and was sent flying. As expected, the one who was sent flying was Nangongja. On Nangongja's right shoulder, blood was flowing out of a bloody hole. Traces of lightning moved up and down on Nangongja's wound, preventing Nangongja's wound from healing. Yes, it was the masterpiece of the Calamity Sword. Your mind is in a mess. Do you think that you can become a real swordsman with a few exquisite sword moves and your physical fitness? You're too naive. The man in the blood-red shirt looked at Nangongja and said. Chapter 88. Nangongja clenched the wooden sword in his hand tightly. Due to the numerous clashes with the disaster sword, the wooden sword was already full of scars, and there were deep cracks in several places. However, Nangongja did not know how to refute the man's words. Whether it was strength, speed, or sword moves, the man in the blood-red robe was almost crushing him. Just now, Nangongja also felt an inexplicable sense of impatience. Since Nangongja started fighting people, his opponents were basically ninjas, or ninjas who were proficient in some sword techniques. It was almost unprecedented for Nangongja to fight with a pure martial artist. This time, Nangongja had always been on the losing side in the battle between the man in crimson clothes. Although he did not feel anything, the subconscious self-esteem hidden in his heart made Nangongja's heart uneasy. Huff! Nangongja exhaled a long breath, and Nangongja's restless heart and impatience seemed to have slowed down a little. Whether it was the Azura Blood Sea diagram or the spatial crack before, they were all different. In fact, they had already consumed a lot of Nangongja's energy. Under such circumstances, it was normal for Nangongja's mental state to be a little unstable. After Nangongja exhaled, he stabbed the man in the blood-red robe with his sword. This attack was no longer as hurried as it had been at the beginning. The effect was also much better. When the sword was 3 inches away from the man in the blood-red robe's chest, the man in the blood-red robe used the disaster sword to block Nangongja's sword. This sword strike is not bad. Let's continue. Let me see what kind of master my disaster sword has chosen for me. The man in the blood-red robe was not angry because he almost got hit. Instead, he looked very happy and interested. Since you're back to normal, I'll be a little more serious, right? The crimson-robed man's eyes turned cold. His eyes were filled with sharp sword energy. When Nangongja met the man's gaze, he felt a stinging pain in his eyes. The Azura Blood Sea isn't just for suppressing. Learn it well. As the man spoke, the Azura Blood Sea diagram that had just appeared behind him transformed into a bloody mist. It wrapped around the Tribulation Sword in his hand. The man forcefully swung the Tribulation Sword in his hand, and a crescent-shaped blood-red sword chi attacked Nangongja. From time to time, shrill cries could be heard coming from the blood-red sword energy. One after another, ghosts were moving about on the blood-red crescent-shaped sword. As long as one came into direct contact with this blood blade, it was very likely that one would be devoured by the malicious spirit hidden within before being harmed by the sword chi. Then I have to thank you for teaching me how to use it. The crimson-robed man's actions had inspired Nangongja to a certain extent. Nangongja's thoughts followed Nangongja's thoughts, and the appearance of Yama that had just formed appeared behind him. Nangongja nodded at Yama behind him. Yama seemed to understand Nangongja's intention. Ha! Yama, with a green face and fangs, let out a low roar. He turned into a black thunderbolt and wrapped around the broken wooden sword in Nangongja's hand. This was originally an ordinary wooden sword. However, at this moment, after Yama's black thunderbolt transformed into Yama, it emitted a shocking aura. Break! Nangongja turned around and faced the blood-red sword chi that was following him. It was only 2 to 3 meters away from his roommate. He held the wooden sword slightly and charged it for a short period of time. Nangongja used the wooden sword wrapped in black thunderbolts to slash at the blood-red sword chi. The black and red sword chi collided and entangled with each other. In the end, after a loud explosion, there was no trace of them anymore. The crimson-robed man's figure gradually appeared in the smoke of the explosion. The catastrophe sword in his hand was still wrapped in blood-red clouds, but it was obvious that it had become much fainter. The Azura Blood Sea painting used the souls of the dead, as well as various kinds of blood chi, killing intent, and evil spirits to unleash its strongest power. However, Nangongja had formed the true form of Yama. Yama was a kind of power that ruled between heaven and earth. Therefore, when the Azura Blood Sea painting confronted the true form of Yama, it was almost impossible to unleash its greatest advantage. This was also the fundamental reason why Nangongja could rely on his newly formed true form of Yama to fight against the crimson-robed man's Azura Blood Sea painting, which had been formed for countless years. "Senior, can't you and I talk nicely? I already have a rough idea of who you are. You don't have any evil intentions towards me. Otherwise, I would have been eaten by all kinds of undead in the Blood Sea." Looking at the crimson-robed man's figure, Nangongja was panting at this moment. "Of course I know that you have already guessed my identity. It was probably that old toad from Mount Mayaboku who told you, right? When he used his useless dream entry technique to observe me, I had already noticed. I just didn't want to talk to him. My name is Banishment." Although the crimson-robed man kept talking to Nangongja, the sword in his hand never stopped moving. Instead, it was constantly attacking Nangongja. "Of course I don't have much time. I have to hurry up and let you truly step onto the path of the sword." When Nangongja narrowly dodged one of the Banishment's sword moves, he heard Banishment's words. "Time?" Nangongja looked at Banishment. There were some doubts in his heart as well as some vague guesses. "Yes, I don't have much time. I actually died a long time ago. It's just that a wisp of my soul is residing in this heavenly tribulation sword. In order to let you comprehend the origin, I have already consumed a lot of power. Now I have to hurry up. Otherwise, when my soul dissipates, I won't be able to truly teach you." Banishment constantly waved the heavenly tribulation sword in his hand. Exquisite sword moves were casually used on Nangongja. Nangongja exerted force on his feet and used the wooden sword to block Banishment's sword moves. Even his body was cut a few times by the sharp sword chi. He used all his strength to block Banishment's sword. He stared at Banishment's eyes with his own eyes. "Then we don't have to do this. Even if you are just a wisp of your soul, you can still continue for a long time as long as you properly nourish yourself. Why are you in such a hurry to teach me in such a way that harms your own origin?" That's right. He could have taught Nangongja slowly. However, Banishment still used such an extreme method, which really made Nangongja confused. Chapter 89. Haha. The success and failure of my life were due to the heavenly tribulation. I forged the heavenly tribulation sword and used it to reach the peak of my life. However, when I died, the only thing I could attach my soul to was the heavenly tribulation sword. As Banishment spoke, he subconsciously stopped his sword. He only looked at the sword that had accompanied him for almost his entire life. The heavenly tribulation sword has its own power because of the heavenly tribulation. However, the heavenly tribulation is also the greatest nemesis of all souls that have no one to rely on. When I attached myself to the heavenly tribulation sword, my soul was still very strong and could resist the might of the heavenly tribulation sword. However, time has passed and years have passed. After several hundred years, my soul has long since become weaker and weaker. It has even made the connection between me and the heavenly tribulation sword even tighter. Even if I wanted to leave the heavenly tribulation sword and find something to rely on, it would be impossible. Banishment smiled. To Nangongja's surprise, there was no bitterness or helplessness in his smile. Instead, there was a deep sense of contentment and happiness. This was the first time that Nangongja had seen Banishment's smile other than a sneer. For a moment, the smile on Banishment's handsome face was like the clouds parting to see the sun. It was so blissful and at ease. As a swordsman, isn't this a great way to die? The sword is the only thing that I have attached myself to in my life. It is also the thing that I have trusted the most in my life. At the end of my life, I am not facing the enemy's sword. Instead, I am facing the sword that has accompanied me for my entire life. Isn't this great? Banishment looked at Nangongja and smiled at Nangongja. Isn't this great? If you want your sword art to become more powerful, if you want your way of the sword to become more magnanimous, what you need to do from the very beginning is to be honest with your heart. I have always attached myself to the heavenly tribulation sword. When you first poured your internal energy into the heavenly tribulation sword, I had already awakened my consciousness. I have seen your battle with the white-haired kid from Woodleaf. I have also experienced the baptism of the aura of the ninja that you called Woodleaf White Fang with you. I have fought the bandits of Lion Mountain with you. I have also faced the smoke of the Ninja World War with you. I have seen you save innocent people. I have seen you kill unarmed civilians. If there is someone who truly understands you, perhaps I am the most qualified, right? When a person ends another person's life, what they reveal is their true self. Some people are happy, some are crazy. Li Jie kept talking and every word struck Nan Gongjia's heart. Nan Gongjia had never thought that there would be a person silently watching over him in every battle he fought. It must be known that even Li Yang's aura is sleeping in her body most of the time. In an extremely special situation, or when Nan Gongjia takes the initiative to call her, Li Yang doesn't care much about the outside world. Suddenly, knowing that banishment has been paying attention to him, Nan Gongjia was a little surprised. There is also a strange feeling lingering in his heart, and he doesn't know how to express it. But when you kill people, you don't have such negative feelings. Banishment ignored the changes in Nan Gongjia's heart, and just said, when you end every life, no matter whether the person is good or bad, you will bury a deep feeling of pity in your heart. This is also why the Azura Blood Sea chart has a situation like the 10,000 ghosts gnawing on your body. Because in the depths of your heart, you have a sense of guilt towards each and every one of them. This is very good. Only in this way will you not lose yourself. Back then, I was also a person who was possessed by the devil. I didn't lose my consciousness. The most important thing is this pity. This is the first time banishment mentioned that he was possessed by the devil. It is also the reason why Nan Gongjia knew that banishment can resist the madness of being possessed by the devil. But do I really have this kind of pity that can resist the madness of the devil? Nan Gongjia asked banishment and himself. The feeling of pity will never become small. It is like a seed that slowly takes root in your body. One day it will grow into a towering tree. Banishment shook his head and said, your current inner strength hasn't transformed to its strongest state yet. This is because you haven't completely merged the sword energy and inner strength in your body. Only a small amount of sword energy is attached to the inner strength in your body. You still need to become stronger because the chaotic world is about to begin. After listening to banishment's words, Nan Gongjia was shocked. Especially the word chaotic world, Nan Gongjia had an unusual feeling in his heart. Chaotic world? Banishment nodded. Yes, whether it is me, the Three Holy Lands or even Li Yang. We all have a premonition that the world is about to face a challenge. This is a perception that all people who have surpassed a certain level of strength will get. This is also the reason why I was willing to stay in the Heaven's Disaster Sword for countless years. This world needs people to save it, not one person. It is the gathering of all the forces in the world. Only then will it be possible. Nan Gongjia heard banishment's words. Although he believed what banishment said. But how difficult is it to gather all the forces of the ninja world? Every ninja village has a blood feud with each other. A large number of people who wander around in another ninja village will encounter a large number of their enemies and want to draw their swords against them. Cooperation? It is simply an impossible task. I once met a contractor of Mount Mayaboku. When he chatted with me, I learned that Mount Mayaboku has been looking for a person who can unify the forces of the ninja world. They want this person to become the Son of Hope. Although the old toad is usually quite unreliable, his prophecies have never been wrong. So, such a person must exist. But I also made my own plans and established a secret organization. If you can pass my test and become a real swordsman, you can bring the Heaven's Disaster Sword with you. You can bring the Heavenly Tribulation Sword there, and one day in the future, you can contribute to this world the strength of us inner force cultivators. As Li Jie spoke, she raised the Heavenly Tribulation Sword that had been hanging by her side. Let's finish the gossip, let's continue the training. Although it was a question, banishment completely ignored Nan Gongjia and wanted to continue to ask questions. Instead, he continued to attack Nan Gongjia again and again. Yes. Let's wait for the next day. The most important thing now is to let you, the former owner of the Heaven's Disaster Sword, truly recognize me, right? Nan Gongjia also raised his wooden sword and rushed forward. Chapter 90. Flap. Nan Gongjia, who had been sitting for a long time, suddenly trembled. Dust began to fall from his body. The surrounding air suddenly became a lot more polluted. Crack, crack. Nan Gongjia tried to move his body, and every joint of his body let out popping sounds. I don't know how long I've been in the banishment seniors training. My body is so stiff. Nangongja smacked his lips. Obviously he was very dissatisfied with his body. In the spiritual space, Nangongja had been fighting with the banishment senior's sword. Nangongja was so nervous that he did not realize the passage of time. Of course, this could also be because there was nothing in the spiritual space that could be used as a reference for the passage of time. Although I've already prepared myself for the fact that the banishment senior's soul will dissipate after this training, I still can't believe it. At this moment, I still can't suppress the emotions in my heart. Nangongja raised the black sword in front of him. There was not a single speck of dust on it. It was the Heaven's Disaster Sword. At this moment, the Heaven's Disaster Sword seemed to have sensed that its master was holding it again. Some of the cracks on the sword's body flowed with a blue light. Nangongja stood up. Holding the Heaven's Disaster Sword, he gently waved it. A burst of sword chi burst out from his body and scattered all the dust on his clothes. Nangongja touched his hair that had almost reached his waist. He smiled awkwardly. This time my hair has reached my waist, right? He was too lazy to care about his long hair. He took out the bandage that was supposed to be used to bandage his wounds and casually tied up his hair to prevent it from getting in the way. He looked at his surroundings. At this moment, Nangongja was in an underground cave. Although the surroundings were dark, there were still patches of glowing moss that emitted a faint light. In front of Nangongja was a huge rock that was engraved with many spells. Nangongja relied on the spell formation on this rock to summon the banishment senior's soul with the Heaven's Disaster Sword. There was only one exit around him. Nangongja did not pay much attention to it. He picked up the long sword and walked towards the exit. This part of the cave was not short. Nangongja walked for almost 5 minutes before he reached the exit of the cave. The scorching sunlight was slightly dazzling, illuminating Nangongja's skin, which had turned pale from staying underground for too long, with a crystalline luster. Nangongja raised his hand and slightly blocked the scorching sunlight. At the same time, he discovered a small lion cub to the side of the cave exit that he had just exited. This small cub was only the length of his forearm. It was very cute. Hey little lion. Wake up. Nangongja squatted beside the small cub. He used his hand to poke the small cub's chubby cheeks. Why don't you look at yourself? Arthur didn't finish his words. He looked at Nangongja standing in front of him and suddenly felt that this person was somewhat familiar. Just like the person sitting in the cave. The small cub seemed to have become a little flustered at this moment. After running around for a long time, he finally calmed down a little bit. Looking at Nangongja in front of him. You are Master Li Yang's contractor? Although it was a question, the small cub already had a plan in his heart. Okay, go and find Li Yang. Nangongja smiled and looked at the very anxious small cub in front of him. He didn't mind the small cub's attitude just now. After all, although the small cub seemed to be overbearing just now. But it was still very cute, wasn't it? Yes. Nangongja-sama, I will go and find Master Li Yang. The little lion lowered its head towards Nangongja as a form of greeting before running off without a trace. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.